My entitled gym teacher constantly made fun of me all because I was not athletic. But after dealing with this for so long, I finally found my chance at revenge, where I proved him wrong in a way that made him vomit from exhaustion after we participated in a sport that I knew for a fact I could beat him in, putting him in his place in a way that he never forgot because that guy never bothered me ever again. Here's how it all went down. To start things out, I was born with a heart disease and I had surgery as a kid. I am completely okay, but sports was obviously not my thing. I was small, I was skinny and clumsy because I never really could do the typical outdoor stuff like most kids. I got teased and bullied and all that other stuff, which is pretty typical for a geeky kid who doesn't excel with football. In high school, we had a mildly problematic physical education teacher, a typical sports dude who would make fun of the slower kids. I still remember how he ordered my overweight friend to do a gymnastics jump from a trampoline over a stool, which he obviously couldn't do, and he fell so hard that he cracked his head. I found peace with myself long before and mostly just didn't care and just took it. But it was stupid, and I hated how he always encouraged the jock culture of making fun of the nerds. We would constantly do basketball or soccer. The thing about my specific condition is that I don't do explosive and reactive sports at all, so I would have to sit down every few minutes just to catch my breath. Now, you might think to yourself, okay, what's wrong with that? But I was shamed as being the weakling of the class every single week. But I really like sports though. I like them a lot. I was just always told by my parents and doctors to take it easy. And growing up, I noticed that I had no problem whatsoever with endurance and steady long distance efforts. As long as I didn't go into the red, I could keep up for quite a while. So it's not a surprise I fell in love with road cycling when I first saw the Tour de France on TV. I was super skinny, I couldn't sprint, but I could climb a long mountain any day, pacing myself and blowing nearly anyone off my wheel on endurance. I got myself a road bike and I never told anyone at school about my rides. And it's right about now that my revenge comes into play. We had a class that was like a sports day, and there was a bus arranged to take us to the top of a mountain about an hour away, which is where we would go on a hike. Our PE teacher said that if anyone wants, he'll cycle up there and we could join him on the climb instead of the hike. Well, I was the only one who volunteered. He was surprised and commented something to the effect of keeping up and that he's not going to wait for me, but even then I still insisted. Now, he couldn't know that I was more than capable to climb that mountain because he only saw me struggling with sports with him. He also couldn't know that that was my home hill, literally starting a kilometer from my house. I did that climb 100 times and I knew it blind. I knew my pacing, and while I was no expert, I knew I could probably drop my teacher off whenever I wanted right then and there. For cyclists out there who climb stuff like this, I mean, it was super regular, but for a non-cyclist, it's a perfect climb for a lightweight rider with good pacing and stamina. So the day arrives and I did my warm-up, my nutrition, and everything, as if this was a life or death mountaintop time trial. Plus, I rocked up at the school in my full racing kit and my racing bike. I was 17 years old, I weighed 55 kilograms, and I was totally prepared. My teacher, on the other hand, was your typical middle-aged, overconfident ex-soccer player, probably weighing about 90 kilograms, rolling up on a standard mountain bike, which is like a super perfect situation. He sets a relatively hard pace on the 10-kilometer flat before the climb, and I don't speak or even take the front. I take my good time to get back on his wheel after intersections, and he probably thinks he will drop me the second he starts going uphill. But then the climb starts and it becomes very apparent to me, but not to him, that he is near his limit, but at least it's about 10 kilometers slower than what I could do on that mountain. But you know what? I don't attack him. I mean, that simply wouldn't be satisfying. Instead, I start bantering, oh, someone's about to get dropped off today, and wouldn't it be embarrassing if the whole class sees how I beat him? And then once I take over the pace, I slowly start turning the screw on him. I started off by going a little faster and then a bit more, and I knew after about 3 kilometers he was in the red. So I eased off, keeping him just slightly over his limit for the next half hour. I mean, I wanted to make him suffer, but without dropping him. I let him recover for a tiny bit if he starts looking too bad, but then I would slowly push the tempo up to make it as painful to him as possible. It was Tour de France level mind games, and I seriously don't think I've ever enjoyed myself on a bike more in my life. We made it near the top together, and I let it rip on the last 30 meters or so, and it was that typical humiliation attack that every amateur group ride cyclist knows, because this guy dropped like a stone. I finally got my revenge on this guy, and I was very happy with myself. He tried to say something about his heavy bike, but I just kept my mouth shut. But trust me, it got even better. On the top, he was clearly dead. So much so that he had to vomit in the parking lot, and even if only a few classmates saw it, everybody knew. He then had to sit out of the hike after that, and I just quietly sat there with him because I didn't need to do the hike like he promised, and I just looked at him enjoying the sweet revenge. Now, I didn't say anything after that, and nor did he, but he also never made any comments to me in PE class ever again. So hopefully he learned his lesson that you don't bully your students, because because sometimes they might just surprise you in ways that you definitely were not expecting. Okay, I've had gym class teachers like this and they are the worst. Like, seriously, this is so mean. Like, historically speaking, this is like the one spot that bullies love to go to because the physical differences between kids becomes very apparent. Like, I'm not kidding. I remember being bullied as a kid and like the gym class would be the worst place in the world for me. That's the one spot where you're like, dude, I'm just trying to survive so I can get out of here. So when you've got a teacher who literally is the bully, it honestly is so disheartening and it just really sucks. So I love the fact that you got back at this guy and really put him in his place in a way that is completely irrefutable. Like, this guy threw up in the parking lot, he was so sick to his stomach. There's no way he's coming back from that in my opinion, because the way he acted towards those kids was just completely unacceptable.
If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. My girlfriend's anxiety completely ruined my sister's wedding night for me, and at this point, I'm very frustrated and I just don't know how to address this. Here's how it all went down. Okay, so I've been with my girlfriend for almost 3 years now. I love her deeply, but she has really bad social anxiety. She gets super quiet, avoids people, and kind of just shuts down in social settings. I've always tried to be patient, but something happened at my sister's wedding that really hurt me. Before the wedding, everything was great. She was excited to go and kept saying how happy she was, but once we got there, she just completely froze. She barely talked to anyone, she sat with her friend most of the night, and even avoided my family and friends completely. When the DJ asked for all the couples to come and dance, I asked her to dance with me, but she said no. Later, I asked her to take a photo with me, my sister, and her husband, but she said no again. I even said to her, "Baby, I want us to take a photo, please," and she still refused to do so. When I tried to introduce her to my friends, she just said, "No, don't," and looked upset when I did it anyways. One of my brother's friends even commented later that my girlfriend was just sitting alone all night. And seriously, it was embarrassing. It honestly felt like I went to a wedding with a friend and not my girlfriend of 3 years. What confused me is that when we were sitting down alone, she would be affectionate and throw me kissy faces or touch my hand, but when it came to big moments like dancing or taking photos, she just kind of completely shut down. After the wedding, I told her I felt rejected and alone, and she said she was anxious the whole time and that my asking her to dance or take photos in front of people made her feel like I was showing her off. But that's not what I was trying to do at all. But even if it was, shouldn't your partner have your back in moments like that instead of turning you down multiple times? She has apologized and said that she feels horrible for ruining my night, and I believe her, but it still hurts. I want her by my side, not hiding, not saying no over and over again. I hate that her anxiety keeps stealing these moments from us. I want to support her, but I also want a partner who can stand with me when it matters the most. So how do I support her anxiety without feeling constantly left alone? And is it fair to expect her to push past her comfort zone when it comes to big life events like this? Because right now I don't know what to do. Okay, honestly, I want to touch on the last thing the original poster said, where they're like, okay, is it fair to push her and be like, hey, you gotta come out of your comfort zone here? Because in my opinion, I think yes, absolutely, especially for stuff like this. This is one of those things that's outside the norm, where you need to be social and available, especially for your partner. Because the fact that she was like, no, don't introduce me, I'm too embarrassed, this is too much. Like, dude, why'd you show up in the first place? Like, honestly, instead of mentally and emotionally prepping for this situation and saying, okay, I've gotta be available, I've gotta show up and put on a good smiling face, the girlfriend in this situation decided to basically ruin it by being like, no, I'm too anxious, don't do it. Like, seriously, in my opinion, if you feel that way, then maybe just don't show up. Figure out your stuff with a therapist or through medication and then start going to events. Don't sit there and act like you're excited to go only to then get there and then shut down and completely ruin things. And I'm not saying that to discredit someone's anxiety, but if you know you are that way, then why put yourself in a situation that you're not prepared for? Like, that kind of like responsibility is on you to figure that out instead of your boyfriend sitting there being like, wait a second, I thought you were good. Why are you all of a sudden acting like this is a problem and that you just don't want to be here? So seriously, in my opinion, I think the girlfriend absolutely needs to apologize and she needs to figure her stuff out in the future, because her reactions here were completely uncalled for and, in my opinion, very rude. My entitled landlord tried to deny giving back our deposit we put down on his apartment, as he tried to trick us into signing legal forms that would have gotten us into a lot of trouble if we had actually gone through with it, putting me and my wife in a situation that honestly we wish we never had to experience. Here's what happened. Okay, to start things out, this happened outside the United States. We rented an apartment for more than 7 years while saving up for a house, and we had to put down 25% down due to not being a citizen. In that time, our landlord never fixed anything and was just generally a typical male boss archetype. type. He ordered my wife around, looked at our mail, and tried to smoke in our non-smoking house. We had found a place under construction but needed 6 more months for it to be ready. But then he decided to sell the place before our lease was up. In order to placate him, we let agents show the apartment while we were still living there. As tenants, we have the right to refuse while under the lease, but we're just trying to keep him happy for as long as possible. And let me tell you something, the agents were awful. They were taking pictures of my family pictures, asking questions, taking videos, opening pantries, touching our stuff, all of which were prohibited under our agreement. Then they tried to host an open house without telling us. I had to take many deep breaths to keep me from throttling more than one agent. The house finally sold and we were given a month to get out. And this is legal here without much recourse. But thankfully we found a temporary rental and got out within the time frame. We hadn't gotten our deposit back and the landlord said he wanted to meet with my wife to sign some paperwork, but I denied his request and I told him to meet with me and email the papers to my wife and she can translate them. And for reference, the papers were in Chinese. Now here's the best part about all this. The papers he wanted us to sign were actually legal forms, and these forms were saying that we had not paid rent in like 7+ years that we had lived there, and we had stayed there for free out of the goodness of his heart. And when I saw this, I was gobsmacked. My wife is an accountant and works in banking and knew that lying on this form was perjury and punishable up to 7 years in detention. Well, when we saw this, we refused to sign, and his response was sending a text saying that he wouldn't give us back our deposit, which he had already agreed to do in writing unless we signed the form. We then responded by telling him that we would never sign the form and that we had forwarded our communication to the tax office. Well, as you can probably imagine, the entire deposit was wired to our bank account within the hour, and thankfully we never heard from him ever again. But the icing on the cake is that the sale fell through, and his apartment still sits empty because he owes taxes somewhere in the neighborhood of like $15,000. We're now in our new house and we are loving life, especially since we got away from our psycho landlord who tried to screw us over in probably the worst way possible. Holy crap, dude, that guy is a scumbag. Seriously, he tried to get you to sign paperwork without you knowing exactly what it says. Like, that is so sketchy. Like, it's pretty obvious this guy was trying to like scam you in some way, or at the very least get you in trouble with something that you did not do. And I love how you guys handled this. You said, no, we're not signing this. And also, by the way, we're sending all of this to the tax office because nothing is scarier than the IRS. Like, I don't care who you are. And that obviously got the ball rolling in a way that this guy was not prepared for. So good for you. And I'm so glad you got away from this guy because he sounds like an absolute nightmare. Am I the jerk for refusing to buy my girlfriend a $380 knife set, as I feel that is way too expensive for a birthday gift? Because right now she's very upset with me and I just don't know what to do. Here's what's going on. Okay, so me and my girlfriend have been together for about 6 years now. It's always a problem to get her something for her birthday, so I asked her straight up what she wants. At first, she said she does not know and that some nice dinner would simply do for her. But yesterday she came home from work and told me that she saw a very nice set of Japanese knives that she would like me to get, but apparently it's a bit of an expensive gift. Now for reference, the knives are $380, which I think is nonsense to pay that much for knives since she is not a professional cook, like she cooks as a hobby. I told her I think it's unreasonable and that I won't buy it for her. She said okay, but was then quiet the entire evening. When I asked her what happened, she literally just told me that I shouldn't ask her what she wants if I don't want to take it into consideration. I just think it's a bit childish because she gave me one suggestion and I said no. It really shouldn't be such a big deal. Also, money is not the problem here. We both have nice salaries and we're child-free with reasonable monthly expenses. We don't have any limit for the price of the gifts, and for my last birthday, she got me a summer trip to Turkey, which was paid by some benefits from her job. So seriously, am I the jerk here? Because right now I don't know what to do. Okay, honestly, I do think the original poster's the jerk here, simply because your girlfriend literally paid for a trip to Turkey, which I'm willing to bet probably costs a lot more than the knife she wants for her birthday. Like, dude, come on, that is so weird to like split hairs over that. I'm not saying that this is like transactional, but if you really want to sit there and be like, oh, that's way too expensive, then at least consider what she's done for you. You literally say that, yeah, money's not an issue, but here you are saying that, yeah, money is actually an issue. So personally, I do think the original poster's a jerk because this is obviously something you could definitely take care of. A group of entitled Karens in my townhouse community literally tried to cancel Halloween in our neighborhood, all because it was a little too windy for their kids, leaving me completely shocked by the audacity and the stupidity of my neighbors. Here's what happened. Okay, so I live in a townhouse community and we use WhatsApp as a group chat. There are about 200 homes in this community, and the first message was sent 2 days before Halloween. It said the following: please do not put out any candy with nuts because some kids in the community are allergic. And it's like, okay, I get it, but most people already bought candy at this point, and I'm sorry, sorry, but I'm not always thinking about who might have an allergy. I just threw the $18 bag in the cart and I moved on with my shopping. The second message was sent out then 2 hours before Halloween started. It said, I think we should postpone Halloween until another time. It's too windy. But that's when someone piped up and wrote in the chat that Halloween is never canceled unless it's a state emergency. So just bundle up your kids, they will be fine. To which I completely agreed. Now the third message was the most upsetting. Tons of people were messaging saying, hey, don't skip our house guys, the light is on, knock for candy. And some parents were outside, including us, so I didn't see the text until later on. But I did notice that kids were running to my bowl that I was holding and grabbing hands full of candy while parents were pushing and rushing them along the road. It was so weird and chaotic. But then I noticed my phone. A parent wrote down, there's no time for tricks, only treats. Leave the candy outside so kids can grab it and go. Another one said, yes, we are fast tracking Halloween this year because it's cold, so we don't have time to knock on your doors. Leave the candy outside so kids can just take what they want. And seriously, this was so upsetting to read. Like, what a sense of entitlement. What happened to the tradition of knocking, saying trick or treat, and then an adult handing you candy? I'm not blaming the kids because they are little, but why did these parents teach the kids to run to the house and grab handfuls of candy? Why didn't they teach them to say trick or treat and then open the bag? And why were they told to say thank you? I don't mean for this to sound so whiny because it is about the kids and I'm glad they have the memory. But seriously, I really think we can teach our kids about patience and politeness because this seemed incredibly overboard. Oh yeah, that is super obnoxious. I would hate that. The second I see messages from Karens like this, leaving messages that are like really entitled and demanding in this group chat, that's the second I would leave that group chat and just be like, okay, I'm not doing this. I mean, come on, they wanted to cancel Halloween because it's too windy. Are you kidding me? There's no reason for that, like literally, because holy crap, I hate people trying to dictate what I can and cannot do with my life, and those messages would truly drive me up a wall. My idiotic boss decides to make a stupid new rule that no longer allows people to go home early if they finish their job, putting me in a situation that honestly was really annoying at first, but also allowed me to find a loophole where I get to work as much as I want and get some sweet overtime in the process, which in the end is something I will absolutely take advantage of. Here's what happened. So my job used to be that when you're done, you go home. The earlier you're done with your task, the sooner you can go home. So I just work and I skip my 30-minute lunch break and my 2 15-minute breaks. And if I do that, I get to go home early. Recently, we got a new manager and they changed a lot of rules. And now we must keep going back out until everyone is done. And as a result, our workload has tripled. Well, with all that in mind, this is where my malicious compliance comes into play. I had finished my work fast with no breaks. Then I stepped up and I helped someone else. I then came back to the office and already had about 12 hours on the clock with no breaks. The new boss then yells at me that not everyone is done, so get back out there. One person needed about 30 minutes of help, but he was about a 20-minute drive away. So even if I started driving now, I would barely get there in time to help out. And I tried to explain this to the manager, but he just repeated himself. Nobody goes home until everyone is done. So I say to myself, okay. I jump in the work truck, I drive to a nearby drive-thru, and I happily clock out for lunch. 30 minutes of relaxation and eating a burger later, I then clock back in and call the guy who needed help. He says that he's done and the manager had called it a day. I then went back to the office and the manager is there steaming. And yes, they absolutely tracked me via GPS. But the best part about it is that he can't do anything about it because I followed his rules. But honestly, with all things considered, I am never rushing this job ever again. I mean, I'm gonna take my sweet time. Every single day is going to be 12 hours or more, so I might as well make it an easy 12 hours. Okay, honestly, I think I would do the exact same thing if I was in this scenario, because your boss sounds like an absolute obnoxious jerk. Dude, if people are done with their jobs, why do you want them to stay around? That's literally just wasting time and money for pretty much everybody. Like, if I was a manager at a company like this, I'd be like, yeah, if you're done with your work, get out of here. Like, there's no reason to stick around. So I just love the fact that you are milking every second out of this job because clearly you're okay with sticking around. Because those 12-hour work days are definitely gonna add up, and I'm sure you're gonna get some sweet overtime in the process, which in the end will absolutely make all of this completely worth it. Am I the jerk for telling my brother's wife that being a stay-at-home mom doesn't mean that she gets to stay in bed all the time? Because right now, my brother is very upset with me and I'm just not sure how to fix this situation. Here's what's going on. Okay, so my brother and his wife have a 5-month-old baby. He works for long hours while she stays in home to take care of their baby, and I live about 10 minutes away from them and drop by sometimes just to help out. But lately, every time I go there, she's in bed scrolling on her phone or saying that she needs a break. The house is a mess, bottles are everywhere, the laundry's not
not done, there's dishes in the sink, and there's a baby crying most of the time. Well, last weekend my brother called me saying that he was losing it. When I got there, he was trying to cook dinner with one hand and holding the baby with the other. His wife was literally in bed watching Netflix. I then ended up feeding the baby, cleaning up a bit, and helping him calm things down while she stayed in bed the entire time. After that, I went to her and I asked her if she was okay, and she replied by saying, "Yeah, I'm a bit exhausted." Now, I can understand that being a new mom is rough for people, but my brother works about 50 hours a week and still helps with the baby, so I just lost my cool. I then said to him, "Look, being at home doesn't mean that you always have to be in bed scrolling and watching TV shows." When I said this, she started crying and complained to my brother, and now he's mad at me for hurting her. I literally don't have anything against her, I just felt bad for him doing everything by himself, and he is still mad at me for that. So am I the jerk for saying these things to her just because I wanted to help my brother out? Because right now I don't know what to do. Okay, honestly, I'm gonna say the original poster is a jerk simply for getting involved, dude. I understand this is your brother and you really want to try to help him out, but the last thing you want to do is criticize his wife and be like, wow, you're being really lazy right now. It's like, dude, there's probably some crazy postpartum depression going on, and she's been taking care of that baby literally all day. It is so unfair to sit there and be like, wow, all you ever do is sit in bed. I can't believe you're not doing anything. Just because you're a stay-at-home mom doesn't mean you get to lay down all day. And it's like, dude, that probably is the only time she's ever even gotten to lay down. And here you come walking into her room saying some weird stuff like that. So in my opinion, I think you can absolutely come over to help your brother out, if he allows you to come back over, that is. But to make any kind of comment on whether or not she's being a good mom, in my opinion, is completely over the line and absolutely unacceptable.
My entitled boss plans on firing me after I'm asked to hire a fourth member of our team who would, in this case, be my replacement that I would be training. So I decided to get some revenge, and I hired the worst person for the job who didn't know what they were doing and who was very sloppy when it came to customer service. And as a result, my department tanked once I left, and my manager ended up getting fired as well. And I've never been happier to get revenge on somebody in my life. Here's what happened. I first off want to say that all names in this story are fake. So this was a small company, and our team of 3 were best described as tech support for our clients, but it went a bit further than that. I usually helped with setting up databases and also advised clients from time to time if they would benefit from upgrading their plan. As normal with tech support, we get tickets from the clients and would work away with them one by one. I like the challenging problems and usually tried to work hard at them, and it just so happened that my coworker Caroline liked the more standard problems and enjoyed doing something she already knew over something new every single day. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, and as you might imagine, we made a great team and had this kind of unwritten rule about who took which tickets. It was a win-win situation for me, Caroline, the company, and the client. Well, that is until I got a new boss by the name of Bob. He immediately noticed that I was working far fewer tickets than Caroline. I tried to explain to him how not every ticket is the same workload, but because he wasn't very tech savvy and didn't understand half the stuff I was doing, he did not understand what was going on. Also, around 1 month later, we got a huge new client, and I spent a week on site setting up all the databases and stuff that they needed. This drew down my monthly average ticket numbers even further, so it only made sense that I didn't have a lot of tickets under my belt. Now, if Bob would have only had half a brain cell, he could have figured out why that was. But now came something that I honestly did not expect from Bob. He said we need more help on the team, and he was approved to hire a fourth member for our team. Now, I was excited. We all were. We had this new huge client, and things were not yet running smoothly, and our company was expanding fast, so this actually made sense. And he specifically asked me to basically do the recruiting process, as well as to work the new guy in, which I was completely happy to do. And honestly, this should have been my first clue that my boss was trying to set me up for failure by essentially making me train my replacement. Now, that same night, Hans gives me a call, which is weird because Hans is not a caller, he's more of a texter, and he basically said, "You should come over to my house tomorrow because I have some beers that need drinking." So the next day, I get to Hans's house, and we're just talking about normal stuff. We see each other maybe once per month and have a big overlapping friend pool, but this time it was just me and him drinking beers, no other friends around. After some beers, he mentioned that he just updated his resume the day before, and that everyone should always have an updated resume on hand. He then asked me if I had an up-to-date resume, and I felt this was a weird question, and I had an idea where this was going, so I said no. But then I asked him, well, should I have one updated? Is there something that you know that I don't that you might want to tell me? He then says, well, I'm just saying that everyone should have a resume ready, but I couldn't tell you if Bob is thinking about replacing you, but I also couldn't tell you that Bob is thinking about letting you go. And when he said that, I knew exactly what he was trying to say. So I thanked him very much for the beers and I left shortly after that. So now I know I'm going to be fired, and I have a suspicion that Bob has just asked me to hire my own replacement and train him to do my job so that he can take it. And this is where my sweet malicious compliance and revenge comes into play. I fully comply with hiring a fourth member of the team and also pick one that's best suited for what Bob wants, because Bob wants high ticket numbers. So I'm thinking I need someone who's not so smart, with a sloppy attitude that does not care if the customer is happy. After all, customer satisfaction was not important to Bob when he talked about my ticket numbers. So I get right on it. Many people apply, some good ones, but I weed those out very quickly. Resumes with lots of spelling mistakes and very little experience in my sector are the ones that I invite for an interview. The interview stage is trickier because now Bob and someone from HR is sitting in with me, but I am still asking most of the questions and giving my opinions on the candidates. But because I weeded out the good ones, when Bob makes a decision, he just chose the best of the worst. And in my opinion, not even one of the best, because one applicant was quite good, but I asked him stupid questions that did not even make sense, and when he could not answer them, I made him look really bad. I then advise one candidate he ends up picking because he will work very fast and will get a ton of tickets done. At this point, I have another job lined up in 4 months' time, but I wanted to get fired by Bob to get some sweet severance pay. After 2 months of training the new guy, I have just shown him how to do basic tickets, which he can do quite well and fast, but makes a lot of mistakes. And I have let the hard ones slowly build up. Carl, my other coworker, notices this, and as he would be the only one after my firing to be able to handle these complicated ones, I let him in on what I'm doing. Now, as chances will have it, he had just gotten an offer from another company, and since he also did not like Bob, he already decided that he will take the offer, but said that he could sit on it for a few weeks and time it with my firing for maximum destruction. Then I tell Bob I'm done working in the new guy, and a week later, he tells me he sadly needs to let me go because my numbers had not gotten any better. He actually used against me the fact that I had not been doing many tickets while I was training the new guy. I mean, honestly, how stupid can Bob be? He also wished me a lot of luck finding a new place to work with my work ethic. Now, this had been the day I was waiting for, and I just thanked Bob and reminded him of the 4 months worth of severance that I was now owed, and also 2 months worth of vacation I had not yet taken and carried over, and I was now entitled to get paid out. As I am heading out, I tell Carl what had just happened, and he opens his drawer with a signed 2 weeks notice and walks into Bob's office. My girlfriend had vacation time left, and we decided to leave for a 4-week holiday to New Zealand the very next week, and while I was there, I proposed to her. I started my new job 1 month after returning from New Zealand, and even got a nice pay bump and an actually good boss. I made sure to thank Hans again, and he kept me in the loop on how my old department went down the drain very quickly, and Bob was let go sometime after that. When that happened, they actually approached me for taking his job, but I declined, even though that would have been the ultimate middle finger straight to Bob. Fast forward to 5 years later, which is the present day, and I started a company together with Hans, doing pretty much the same work, but in a different city, and so far, everything is going really well. You have a very good friend when it comes to Hans. He not only had your best interest in mind, but he gave you a solid heads up that, hey, Bob is going to fire you. And also, this Bob guy is an awful manager. He's one of those managers that only looks at numbers and nothing else. He doesn't realize the fact that you work very hard, and you're the one who practically carries that office. Like, seriously, you had a good thing going, you knew what you were doing, and you had a solid system down. But this Bob guy just had to come in and screw everything up. So honestly, good for you for getting out of there while you could, as well as basically ruining Bob's career at that job, because this guy let you go over stupid reasons, and in the end, he got exactly what he deserved. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Am I the jerk for calling my daughter's father spineless, as well as his girlfriend creepy, after they named their newborn the same name as my daughter? Here's what happened. So for a little bit of context, I ended up getting pregnant with my 10-year-old daughter during a drunken hookup with a friend in my mid-20s. Not Not the most glamorous or flattering truth, but it's the truth all the same. When we found out, we decided to keep the child and co-parent while remaining friends. We were never a couple and we didn't want to be one either. 4 years ago, he began to date his long-term girlfriend, and they both moved in together last year. She got pregnant, and I've been supportive to the both of them as much as I could without crossing any lines. I've encouraged my daughter to help out whenever she's staying with them during the pregnancy, as well as to simply behave. I've also made it clear that I want the children to have a close relationship despite having different mothers. I've even said that if they're comfortable with it on nights that I have my daughter, if they ever want time alone, I'll babysit once they have the baby so my daughter can spend time with her sibling. All in all, I thought everything was great, and I was excited for my daughter to have a sibling as she's always wanted one, but I had no interest in having another child. 3 days ago, my friend and his girlfriend had a daughter. They asked me to bring my daughter to the hospital to meet her little sister yesterday, along with other people of the family, so I did exactly that. But when they introduced us to the baby, I was shocked. They used my daughter's name for the baby. She didn't seem to have any issue with this. When she introduced this baby bold as brass, my friends seemed uncomfortable and wouldn't look at me directly, so I asked them what they were playing at which point my friend's father said that he would take my daughter down to the cafeteria to get something to eat, and she left with them. My friend told me to calm down and not overreact, while his girlfriend told me that she didn't see the issue and it was just a pretty name. I asked them if they had named the baby for my daughter, trying to understand the logic here, but his girlfriend said that no, it was just a pretty name and she liked it. I then asked if they plan on using a nickname or some kind of middle name when addressing her on a daily basis, and her response was that she didn't see a need for that. I told them that they were being ridiculous and that they couldn't do this. I then told his girlfriend that I found this incredibly creepy, and then I told my friend that he was spineless and if he was happy to go along with this. He tried to claim our daughter could use a nickname or something like that, but I shut that down immediately, asking why it was more reasonable for a girl who was used to that name for a decade to shame her name compared to a baby who had no concept of what a name was yet. His girlfriend then told me I was being a jerk for talking to her like that after she just gave birth, and then asked the nurses to remove me, saying that I was being disruptive. Now, maybe my temper is running a bit too hot, and I was maybe a bit too harsh on her after she just gave birth, but this is all just so weird. So am I the jerk in this situation? What should I do? I don't think you're the jerk at all. The fact that the father of your daughter, as well as your former hookup, is naming his new child after his current child is incredibly weird. Like seriously, is it that hard to name that baby something else? Literally any other name would have been appropriate, but they're like, no, let's pick the one name that my daughter has. It's just so pretty. Like, what are you talking about? That's insane. You can't just do that and not expect some kind of problem later on in life. And of course, the kid is not going to have any problem with it, because guess what? She's 10 years old. She doesn't understand how weird this is yet, and she hasn't even seen the tip of the iceberg when it comes to how blatantly annoying this is going to be in her life. Literally, she has a sibling now with her exact same name. It's almost like the father is trying to have like a do-over, because it really seems like because he now has a girlfriend who he can now stick around with, he wants to try again with a baby of the same name. I don't know, it all comes across as really creepy, so I am 100% on the original poster side. So hopefully these people come to their senses and change the baby's name, because honestly, this is going to be annoying for pretty much everybody involved. Am I the jerk for walking out of a wedding that I was a part of and ruining the day for everybody after I found out that the bride is the reason why my former relationship fell apart? Here's what happened. So I first want to start off by saying all names in this story are fake. I dated my ex-boyfriend John for 4 years and got serious enough that we started planning for our future. I thought we were pretty happy, but last year he dumped me pretty suddenly. I tried to figure out what went wrong, but he said it was personal and that I should respect his space. During this time, my best friend Stacy and her fiance Tom were my rocks, letting me crash at their place and just being overwhelmingly supportive and loving. When Stacy asked me to be her maid of honor, I thought it was a no-brainer and happily took on the task. Now, fast forward to what happened this weekend. The morning of the wedding, Tom asked me to meet him for breakfast super early in the morning before all of the festivities. Now, I thought it was weird, but I assumed he maybe wanted me to pass something on to Stacy. What happened instead was that Tom let me know that a few days prior, Stacy admitted to him that she had an affair with John, which was what led to my breakup. He said that Stacy wanted to come clean to start their marriage fresh, and that he was forgiving her to move forward. He had gone back and forth between telling me, and finally decided to spill the beans. I guess he had expected me to forgive Stacy as well, because the affair was so long ago. But the opposite pretty much happened. I just walked out on the wedding. It ended up being such a huge mess, because I was basically running the whole show. Stacy made me do everything, so she didn't even know what was happening at certain times or who to call. And not only that, but everyone realized that the maid of honor wasn't there. She had headshots and bios of the party on her wedding page. And news of the affair eventually got out because her cousin knew John. Stacy and Tom have both been slandering me online now, saying that I ruined their once-in-a-lifetime moment. Some of their friends are on their side, saying that I should have handled the situation more privately and at least stuck out the wedding since it was so last minute. I personally don't know what Tom expected, but either way, I've been getting bombarded with text messages, and I heard that Stacy has been so upset that she's had to take time off work, which does make me feel like a jerk, especially since I've just been ignoring her calls. So am I the jerk in this situation for walking out on this wedding? What should I do? I don't think you're the jerk at all. Maybe I'm heartless, maybe I'm a jerk as well, but this lady is the reason that John broke up with you. Not only did she ruin your relationship, but you also are finding out that John cheated on you. And that is so devastating. Like, seriously, that's not okay. And the fact that she made you not only the maid of honor, but had you schedule all this stuff and coordinate all of the things associated with her wedding, while simultaneously trying to make amends for cheating on her husband, as well as ruining your relationship, with the expectation that Tom and yourself would just forgive her, is, in my opinion, unbelievably toxic. That is so messed up. She did that on the morning of her wedding. Like, is she crazy? If I was a maid of honor in that situation, there's no way I would have helped her out. I would have said, nope, you are on your own. I am not helping you. There's no way I'm letting this slide. And honestly, why should you? She ruined your relationship. The person you thought was your rock in this awful situation, she's the one that actually went behind your back and betrayed your trust. So no, I don't think you're the jerk at all. I would have done the exact same thing. That Stacy lady sounds like an absolute snake, and you have no obligation to try and help her out with anything. And honestly, you walking out on the wedding is better than you causing a huge scene. You could have waited until your maid of honor speech, and then you really could have let her know exactly how you feel. So no, you're not the jerk. You did this in the best way possible, and if she didn't want to ruin her wedding, then she should have had a different maid of honor, to be honest. It's her own fault for thinking this would be okay, and she has nobody to blame except for herself. My idiotic job gave the same punishment for someone being 5 minutes late as they would for someone being 3 hours late. So I decided to maliciously comply and work the system so that I would show up basically to work whenever I want. And there wasn't a single thing that my job could do about it. Here's what happened. So I'm working for a low-level corporation of about 450 employees. I've been there for 5 years, and I have been rising to the top of my department's productivity levels. I mention this as it does pertain to the story. Management had a policy that latecomers would be penalized, but that lateness would be excused under some circumstances. I was good at my job, and I actually loved doing it, so I was more or less a dream employee. I would always show up to work 20 to 30 minutes early because I like to sit in the lunchroom and prepare for my day. Management knew I was almost always early, so if I was late from time to time, and such instances were honestly really rare, they would let it slide, as there was always a valid reason. Now, for some other employees, this latitude was not applied. Chronically late employees would get written up and not have their constant lateness excused. They would complain, of course, but management was firm. They ran an actual meritocracy, where more productive employees would experience preferential treatment. Well, then the business got sold, and we got new management, an international corporation only interested in buying us up, stripping us down, and selling off the company. Now, of course, they denied this constantly, but the fact that over the next 2 years, they stripped us down and sold off the company proved that they were lying. New management comes in and has to make a bunch of idiotic changes. One of those changes is that no reasons for being late are going to be accepted, regardless of validity. Anyone who is 5 minutes or more late for work would be written up. So at the team meeting where this is explained, I asked, so if someone is 5 minutes late and someone else is 3 hours late, the punishment is the same? And they responded by saying yes. So from that day on, I stopped coming in early. I still went to work at my usual time, but I sat in a local coffee shop instead of my work's lunchroom. This meant my work missed out because in the past, I would often help by answering questions, even start work early if needed. needed. And this is because I loved my job, and the old management were wonderful bosses. But I was not doing that anymore under the new management. In fact, if something happened, like having unexpectedly bad traffic, and I was going to end up being a few minutes late, I would just say, forget it. If being late 3 hours is the same punishment as being 5 minutes late, I would just decide to come in later. I would call work to tell them that I was delayed, and then go out and have a leisurely meal in a restaurant, or run some personal errands, or go shopping, or even see a movie. Depending on my mood and how awful the new management had been lately, what would have been, say, a 7-minute lateness on my part would end up seeing me roll in 3 hours late. Sure, it cost me a few bucks, but I made almost as much in bonuses than I did in hourly salary. So missing out on a few hours here or there didn't really bother me too much. I'd come in 3 or 4 hours late, and my new bosses would be fuming, but there was nothing they could do except write me up for the basic tardy, which was the same penalty if I was even 5 minutes late. And to this day, this is still the funniest thing I've ever heard of in my life. Yeah, that's a really stupid system on management's part. Like seriously, in my opinion, especially if you have the proper management in place, it really can be just like a case-by-case situation. It doesn't have to be this super strict thing where you're like, okay, if you're even 5 minutes late, you're getting punished. But I honestly love the workaround, and I love the loophole that the original poster found. They said, oh, 5 minutes and 3 hours is the same punishment? Cool, I'm gonna go see a movie, or I'm gonna go to a restaurant and be like, peace, I'm out. And honestly, I would have done the exact same thing. If I knew I was gonna be late, like absolutely knew for a fact there's no way I'm gonna make it on time, then I absolutely would have done the same thing. I would have gone to get breakfast at a fast food joint, I would have sat and enjoyed myself. I mean, if there's no real punishment for being late, other than being written up or something like that, and it's only counted as being like a basic tardy write-up, then why on earth would anyone want to try and be on time? Like, go ahead, write me up, I'll just be 3 hours late. That honestly is hilarious to me, and it's proof that management really did not know what they were doing. Because how could they not see that this was going to be the case? How did they not know that someone was going to look at that system and be like, okay, I'm not going to do my job properly, I'm going to show up whenever I want, and there's nothing you can do about it. So honestly, with all things considered, good for the original poster for finding this loophole. This company does not sound the brightest, and honestly, with the way they were approaching being the management of this new company, they honestly kind of deserve to have something shoved back in their face. My entitled neighbor hits my car and then lies about it, so I decide to get revenge by ruining over 300 pounds of meat that he had in his freezer while he was away on vacation. And I've never felt better about getting back at a neighbor in my life. Here's what happened. So for starters, this happened about 5 or 6 years ago. For some context, my neighbor, we'll call him Chester, that's not his real name, is your stereotypical weekend outdoorsman type. He owns at least 10 different baseball caps, and they all have camouflage on them. He's one of those types of people. He drives a Jeep, which will be important later on, and usually spends his weekends either hunting, fishing, or prepping for when the world ends. I tried to explain to him once that we were within the fallout range of a major city, so if it got hit, we would be done for either way, but you know what? Whatever. Everybody needs a hobby, and some people's is collecting canned peaches. Now, 2 weeks before the revenge, I came outside to see my car had a broken window on the passenger side, and that part of the frame was dented just above the door handle. I can tell immediately from the size and shape of the dent exactly what it is from. As I said, my neighbor Chester drives a Jeep, and mounted on his front grille is a cable winch that he uses for pulling stumps and all this other stuff. It juts out almost 1.5 feet in front of the bumper and is made of solid steel. Anyone with a picture of the winch and the shape of the dent in my car could probably CSI that pretty quickly just from eyeballing it. The dent is almost identically shaped and situated at the same height the winch was mounted. On top of that, Chester lives directly across the street from me, and he likes to back into his driveway. Conveniently enough, my car is always parked on the street, so he has ample opportunities to hit it if he wanted to. I asked Chester about it, and without saying anything, he shook his head while biting his lip like some kind of clueless cartoon character. I then asked him if anyone who borrowed his car might have done it because the winch itself was pretty scratched up, almost like it's been ramming into things all over town. Again, Chester silently shakes his head and then tries to tell me it was probably teenagers. No exposition, mind you. He just blamed it on teenagers. At this point, I was fuming, but kept my composure and went home to call the police, as well as my insurance company to report it. I managed to get a competent police officer who told me point blank that it was clear what happened, but without a witness, it would be pointless to try and prove it. The insurance agent was equally certain of Chester's guilt, but ended up recommending I pay out of pocket for the repair. Since I was parking on the street, it was a factor the insurance company might use against me if I filed the claim at all. When it came time for them to recalculate and adjust my monthly rate, I could see a significant increase. So it's right about then that I decided to get some revenge. So essentially, a few $100s out of pocket right now could save me several hundred a year going forward if my rate was to increase due to my own negligence, which is what the claim would unfortunately be categorized as. A raw detail for sure, but at least he was honest with me. Fast forward to 2 weeks later, and Chester and his family are going up north to rough it in nature for a week. And despite my cold attitude towards him in recent days, he asked me to keep an eye on his house while he's gone, since I'm the only person in the neighborhood that he trusts apparently. I agreed to it, not because I had any type of revenge in mind, but because he gifted me a large case of beer for my service. His one request was that I call him if we have any extreme weather, because he would need me to check on something. 2 nights after he left, we had a nasty storm, wind, hail, and even a few rolling blackouts. The next morning, I called Chester to ask him what he needed me to check on, but he didn't answer my call. Knowing Chester, he had probably set up camp in some rural part of America with absolutely no cell phone service, even though he asked me to call him if this happened. After a few failed attempts, I went over to his house to inspect for any potential issues that might have arisen from the weather. I figured he was probably worried about his garage flooding since his yard was frequently a moat after heavy rain. I went into the garage and there was no flooding, but something caught my eye immediately. 4 large freezer chests lined up side by side, taking up a huge chunk of the wall. I peeked inside one and immediately realized what Chester was worried about. All 4 of them were packed from floor to lid with meat. Some of it was still in packages from the grocery store, and some of it was wrapped in butcher's paper. It was likely game picked up from Chester's hunting exploits, but on top of one of the freezers was something else that seemed out of place. It was a red Solo cup full of frozen water, with a penny sitting on top. I thought that was weird and dismissed it immediately, but curiosity got the better of me later that day when I got home. I decided to Google it, and what I learned instantly clicked as a way to get the ultimate revenge on Chester for hitting my car and sticking me with the repair bill. There's an old life hack that people used to use when they went on vacation. You freeze a cup of water, then place a penny on top of it and stick it in your freezer. If the power goes out, the water will eventually melt, and the penny will fall to the bottom of the cup. If you return home and the penny is at the bottom of the cup, your freezer was off for an extended period of time, and now everything in it has potentially defrosted and become unfit for consumption. I immediately got up and ran back to Chester's garage to scope out the legitimacy of my nefarious deed. As luck would have it, Chester's circuit breaker was hidden behind a tool shelf, not directly visible to the naked eye. Who would put a shelf in front of a circuit breaker? Well, Chester, of course, so I promptly took the cup out of the freezer and sat it on Chester's porch to let it get in the sun. After a few hours, the ice had melted enough that the penny slipped right to the bottom of the cup. I then put the cup back in the freezer, being very careful to position it exactly where it was when I took it out, all before moving on to the last phase of my insidious plan. I started blowing up Chester's phone with calls and frantic text messages. Chester, where is your circuit breaker? I can't find it and your power is off. Get back to me as soon as possible. I did this countless times over the next 2 days before I finally got a call from Chester. He told me immediately where to go in his garage to find the circuit breaker, which of course I already knew thanks to my prior detective work. I sat the phone down and flipped the circuit breaker twice, once to turn it off and then a second time to turn it back on, giving it just enough time to mess with the digital clocks on all of his appliances. And with that, my revenge was complete. All that was left was for Chester to come back home, which took another 2 days. When Chester got back home, I was nervous, but eager to see if my charade had worked. The next day, I got a knock on my door. It was Chester. He asked me if I wanted some meat to give to my dogs. Apparently, the power had been off for far too long, and all the meat in his freezer had thawed out while he was gone, so he was throwing it all away. I asked him how much he had, and he said it was probably somewhere close to 300 pounds of meat. He didn't want to waste it, so he asked if I wanted to give some to my dogs. I graciously helped myself to roughly half a freezer's worth of meat, and some of it which I stored in my own fridge, with the rest of it, Chester being nice enough to offer to hold on to in his freezer until I needed it. The kicker is that Chester had no idea the meat never actually defrosted, and it was still perfectly good. That very night, I helped myself and my dogs to a couple of nice steaks, courtesy of old Chester himself, who was still busy walking the neighborhood, unloading the tainted meat on anyone who had a cat or a dog that might want it as a meal.
It was at least 4 or 5 months before me and my dogs went through all the meat Chester had given us. I don't know if I made all my money back for the repairs on my car, but at least I didn't have to buy any meat for at least a fortnight. Honestly, that is hilarious. This guy lied straight up to your face. He said, no, I didn't hit your car, despite the fact that this was literally a perfect indent into your car. Like, this guy was a straight up liar. I can't stand people who lie like that. Literally just own up to it, or at least leave a note and be like, hey, I hit your car and I'm really sorry. So while this is kind of a sketchy thing to do, I honestly find this story really funny because the original poster decided, you know what? If I'm gonna suffer, well then congratulations, you're gonna suffer as well. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. An entitled mother refuses to pay me the full amount that I'm owed after staying up all night and watching her children for far longer than we had agreed. And I've never been more frustrated and shocked in my life. Here's what happened. So for a bit of backstory, I've been babysitting since I was about 12 years old. I've been a summer full-time nanny before I got the job at the restaurant I work at now, and I love being around kids. Up until this point, I hadn't had to stop watching any particular child. Usually I would cease my service when children get old enough to be left at home by themselves. I was a junior in high school when this happened, and I knew the boys and the entitled mother of the story really well beforehand, or so I thought at least. So I really had no issue watching the children. They were very polite and well-behaved boys, and I never had any odd feelings towards the parents up until this point. So when the boys' mother asked me if I was free to babysit them, I was like, sure, why not? About 2 days before I went to babysit, I did all of my usual first time working for this family type of things. I asked them if there's any allergies. How long do you want me to watch the boys? Are you comfortable with the pay rate we agreed upon still? Do any of them need medication? And after going through the questions, everything was normal. The plan was I was going to be babysitting from 4 p.m. after school until 9 p.m. that evening. I would feed the boys, give them a bath, get them in their pajamas, make sure the little one went potty before bed at 7 o'clock, and I would get paid when the parents got home from their dinner party. It was $5 per kid per hour for a total of $50 when they arrived. That's really going to be important later on. The night I'm supposed to babysit comes around, and it's a fairly normal experience. The boys were, as they always were during church, well-behaved and very respectful. They stayed out of trouble when I made dinner. They didn't get fussy during bath time. They went to bed after a story and a few lullabies. Everything was great. And then I had 2 hours to do my homework, so this honestly was great. Well, 8:30 rolls around, and the entitled mother texts me that they're going to be about 30 minutes late, as the party ended at about 9 o'clock instead of 8:30. I say to them, oh, that's fine, and I text my dad, and he says that's fine as well. So I go back to my homework. Now, me, having no concept of time, unless I'm really paying attention, I don't notice when 9:30 passes and it hits 10:30. My dad calls because he's concerned that I'm not home yet, and I'm concerned as well, because this entitled mother told me that she would be home only half an hour later, not a full hour. So I tell him I'll check in. I text her and I get no reply. I try to call and I end up having to leave a voicemail. I wasn't left a number for the father, whom I hadn't even met at all before this because he traveled for work. Also because his phone was broken at the time and couldn't receive or send calls. So I was stuck there until the couple got back. I called my dad and let him know the situation, and he said that if she didn't come back by midnight, then I need to call the police. I thought this might be a bit excessive, but nonetheless, I agreed. 11 o'clock rolled around and I text her again, and I still get no response. I call again and it rings until voicemail, and I leave another one, still trying to be polite. But I add a bit of urgency as it is a school night and my dad expects me home. 11:30 hits and I text her again. This time I get a response. We're on our way home, don't worry, we'll be there in 15 minutes. So I'm relieved. I text my dad and he just tells me that he'll wait up for me. I start packing up my stuff because I've finished my homework. I check on the boys to make sure they're asleep, as well as the fact that they're okay just one last time, and I'm prepared to go as soon as they walk in the door. Well, 11:45 rolls around and they still haven't shown up. I'm a bit annoyed now, but I give them the benefit of the doubt and think maybe there's some kind of traffic. Well, midnight rolls around next and they still aren't here. I text her again, but this time I'm not polite at all. I say to this entitled mother, I need to go home. My dad is worried and wants me home. I have school tomorrow and a physics test. When will you be here? I get no response. I put my stuff by the front door and I text my dad again. He's annoyed and tells me that if she doesn't show up by 1 o'clock
o'clock in the morning that he's coming over to watch the boys so I can go home to bed. At 12:30, I get a text message. We'll be home in just a few. We got hung up. By 12:45, the couple gets home. I text my dad that they're home, and he says that he expects me home as soon as possible. The entitled mother comes in with her husband, and neither of them look like they were in a rush. I was visibly annoyed, and the husband looked extremely confused by this. This is also the first time he has ever met me, and he thought that I would be older. The entitled mother said, "Thank you for watching the boys." She then hands me an envelope, and I look inside to see $40. I don't want to be rude, but you owe me more money than this. The entitled mother says, "We agreed on $40, right?" I said, "No, it was $50, $5 per kid per hour." And it's right about then that the husband chimes in. The husband says, "Honey, we're really underpaying her then." He looked like he was doing the math in his head. She says to him, "No, we agreed upon this, so this is what you're getting." Now, when she said this, I was stunned at this point. Up until now, this entitled mother had never shown any signs of entitlement. And after years of being around an alcoholic mother, I knew the difference between drunk and sober, and the entitled mother was completely sober. So I was extremely confused. The husband said, "Honey, when did you tell her that we'd be home?" And the entitled mother said, 1 in the morning. And at this point, I couldn't hide my shock, but the entitled mother is already shooing me out the door. I'm stunned as I'm pushed with my stuff into the driveway and given a swift goodbye. I look at the contents of the envelope, and I'm still extremely angry by this. I text my dad that I'm on my way home, and as I start to get into my car to leave, the husband comes out and wants to talk to me. He asks me, "How much do I owe you?" I say to him, technically almost $60, but it's fine. The husband then says, "No, take this." He then hands me two 20s. I'm sorry about her. She told me that she had a sitter for the entire night. I thought you were a college student. That was unfair. Please drive home safe. I'll pay you the rest this weekend at church. And true to his word, he gave me the last 20 that he owed me, as well as a bit extra for the troubles. This happened 2 more times before I refused to watch the boys ever again. I still see the boys at church, and I love them so much, but I couldn't keep doing this as a high school student, and the boys thankfully understood. Wow, you did this 2 more times? What in the world were you thinking? I'm sorry, but there's no way after that first time that this lady was trying to stiff me my money, I would have shown up to that house and tried to watch her kids. Sure, you love the kids, and those are good boys, and you enjoy spending time with them and being able to take care of them and babysit them, but their mother is a complete Karen. Like, she wasn't gonna pay you your full wage, and she lied about how long you were planning on staying there to watch them. Like, it was literally a school night, and she was making you stay there until what, 1 in the morning? Like, that is not okay. That's completely inappropriate. Thank goodness the husband in this situation actually has a good head on his shoulders. Otherwise, you would have been stiffed a lot of money, and that honestly wouldn't have been fair. So good for you for getting out of that weird babysitting job, because this entitled Karen was taking advantage of you as well as completely underpaying you, and you absolutely did not deserve that in the slightest. Am I the jerk for not wanting to pay extra for a gift my mother-in-law gave me, even though I never asked for the gift in the first place? Here's what happened. My mother-in-law bought me a new coffee machine. I don't know why, as the one I have is still working fine, but whatever, I accepted it. Before leaving, she told me I needed to pay her $30. I asked her why, and she said that she planned on putting only $50 on the gift, but the cheapest coffee machine she could find was around $80, so I needed to give her the $30 that she added for the machine. That really confused me, because if she only planned on putting a certain amount of money in the gift, then why not just give up the coffee machine idea and buy something that actually was $50? She said she didn't care about paying more if it made me happy, but I said, well, clearly you do care, otherwise you wouldn't be asking me for the extra $30. She said it was just a matter of principle, and that if I had any manners, I would pay her. And after she said that, she left. She later texted my husband that she was waiting on the $30 and would take back the coffee machine if I didn't. I told my husband to respond that she could come back and take it because I was not going to give her the $30. My husband is not okay with that because he got attached to the machine, whatever that means, and to just give her the $30. I told my husband if he wanted to keep the machine, then he should give his mom the money that she wants. But he said that I needed to do it because the gift is originally mine, even though I never asked for it. He said I was making this harder than it needed to be, and I was selfish for not paying the extra $30 for the coffee machine his mom got me, especially knowing that he likes it. I have a hard time seeing how I'm wrong, so I'm coming here because there might be a chance that I am in the wrong. Should I just give his mom the $30 like she's asking for and just be done with it? Am I the jerk here? What should I do? Your mother-in-law sounds incredibly weird. Listen, if you're gonna give somebody a gift of some kind, you're not gonna then turn around and be like, actually, you need to pay for this gift. At that point, it's not a gift anymore. This is now like a forced purchase, and it's a forced purchase you did not ask for. That is incredibly weird in my opinion. There's no way this is appropriate. It's incredibly rude, this is so disrespectful, and she's just trying to guilt trip this person into paying for it as if they had any kind of skin in the game when it came to purchasing this stupid coffee machine. The original poster seems like the only person who has any kind of head on their shoulders or who is in any kind of way like being rational about this. Like the mother-in-law buys the original poster a gift that's really for the husband and then expects the original poster to pay for it. Like that's really what it kind of seems like at this point. So no, I wouldn't pay for anything. In fact, I would take that coffee machine out today if I was in your shoes and I would drop it off at her house and say to her, here you go, I'm not paying for anything, and then just be done with it. If your husband really thinks you're being irrational and if he really likes this coffee machine, then he would pay his mother the $30 she's demanding. So no, I don't think you're the jerk. I think your mother-in-law and your husband are being a bunch of weirdos, and there is no reason that you should be forced to pay for a gift that was given to you that you never even asked for in the first place. Am I the jerk for refusing to give my son's room to my cousin who is currently living with us and demanding to take his room? Here's what happened. So to start things out, my partner and I have two kids, Luke and Jay. Luke is 18 years old and Jay is 15 years old. Now, we took the boys under our care when they were 8 and 11 years old. Before they came with us, they had been in different families and group homes for over a year. It was hard for Luke to understand that they were with us for good and that he had his own bedroom and family. Me and my partner know that he still sometimes has insecurities about it, and a recent one was about him leaving for college. He explained to Luke that even if he was 18 and leaving the house, he would still have a room and a place at home, be it now or in 10 to 25 years, that he would still be our kid at 40 and we will always be here for him. Now, here's the issue. My cousin, who's a 42-year-old female, recently broke up and needed somewhere to live for her and her two boys. Me and my partner have a house big enough, and we agreed to host them free of charge for 6 months until she gets her bearings back. For the house itself, my partner and I have a kind of master bedroom with our bedroom, a bathroom, and an office. Our boys have their own room and they share a bathroom, and my cousin's boys have the guest room with a bathroom. My cousin has a room on the ground floor. It's not big, but she has the space for a bed, as well as a desk and a wardrobe. Last week, we got the keys for Luke's flat, and we started the process of furnishing it. He will officially move in next week, and we'll start university the week after. This weekend, my cousin asked when Luke's room will be empty, but I told her that it won't be, and that he will only take his clothes, his books, and decorative items. Basically, his room will stay the same, and he will take only what he wanted. She then asked how she will be able to move in the room with all of his stuff still here. I told her that she won't, that it will still be his bedroom. He will still come home on some weekends and holidays. She then complained about the fact that she was living in a storage room, that she was the only one without her own bedroom, and that it was unfair to us to have an empty bedroom in our house and not give it to her. My partner and I were very firm in our decision, but my mom and aunt called and told me that it was a bit unfair of us to not offer proper accommodation for my cousin, and that Luke could do without a room for a few months now that he has a flat for the school year. But I completely disagreed. For me, it's more than a room. It's what it represents. It's his own place for him in our home, and it's something I want him to have for as long as possible. I've been called selfish and that I was coddling him too much over this, so I honestly need an outsider perspective. Am I the jerk here? What should I do? I don't think you're the jerk at all. Your sons come from very sketchy backgrounds. They were in group homes and other families for a while, and this is the first time they finally felt like they were at home. So for you to tell your son, yes, your room will be there when you come back, that in my opinion is really sweet, and that is the mark of a really good parent. So it's honestly really disrespectful that your cousin would suddenly be like, man, my room is like a storage closet, give me Luke's room. Like, no, we have made our decision, you're not taking it, you're not moving into it, and that's the final word. I don't care if your mom or your aunt or if the Pope comes in there and says you've got to move it. This is your home, so it's your rules. Your cousin has no say over it, and it's honestly kind of rude for her to try and make some kind of demand, even though she has no ownership over the home. I know if I was in her situation, I would just be happy to have a place to live at. So no, you are not the jerk here. Your cousin is being weird, and your extended family is also being weird, because at the end of the day, you decide who stays where in your home. And in my opinion, no amount of complaining should ever change your decision. My boyfriend humiliated me at prom and then attacked me in my home after I embarrassed
embarrassed him for leaving him at prom. So I decided to get revenge by attacking him with over 1,000 bees. And I've never been in more trouble in my life. Here's what happened. So here's some background information to start things off. I come from a family of sideline beekeepers, so I've been around bees my entire life. I have no problem being around creepy crawlies, and bees tend to be comforting in some kind of way for me, but it isn't like a pet or anything like that, but more like a distraction overall in my life. But anyways, I'm a bit weird because I like bees more than people. My dad sells honey and queen bees as a side business, with his main job being an architect. I started dating a junior athlete in high school about 2 years ago, and he was everything I wanted when I was going through my teen fantasy phase. He was tall, he was blonde, he smelled great, and he was an absolute delight to be around. For the sake of this story, we'll call him Harris. That is not his real name. Now, Harris was a bit of a troubled kid. I knew his parents put pressure on him, but that often led to outbursts at others. Now, since I, his bee-obsessed girlfriend, was there at all times, I was the easiest target to lash out at. Now, I'm not a short girl by any means, but Harris, like I said, was tall. And at the time, I hated to admit it, but I truly was afraid whenever he decided to pick on me. But I mean, these events were so far and few between that I just straight up ignored them because I thought he was amazing. We had some of the best times, and he was someone I could be incredibly close with. But my honeymoon period with him stopped about a year later, which is right about the time when he invited me to senior prom. I was a sophomore at the time, so I was super stoked to go. I picked out a dress and everything, and I was feeling on top of the world. I was a bit on the heavy side back then, but not to the point where it was noticeable unless I took my clothes off. But still, I had a dress on, something that isn't pants. I was so excited. I mean, who cares about your arm fat being out in the open? Well, apparently all of Harris's friends do. I almost forgot that these guys and girls were athletes, and I was absolutely not. As soon as I caught up with them, I found that they were in a totally joking mood, which I thought to myself, okay, that's great. I love jokes. One of his friends said to me, "So Harris really likes you." And I just smiled because I knew this as well. I responded by saying, "Yeah, and I love him too." Harris and I then began to kiss, and his friend just rolled her eyes and said something about me being weirdly cute. Harris grinned at that comment and took a break from me to talk. He said, "Oh really? How is she cute? In what kind of way?" And what was said next about me absolutely blew my mind, as I was insulted in a way that absolutely devastated me. Harris's friend then looked up and said, "She's cute like a baby hippo." Now, when she said that, she probably meant this as a joke, but I thought it was a bit unusual. Maybe I was self-conscious or something like that, and I thought that it was a fat joke. So I didn't laugh, and I could feel my face getting hotter and hotter. I had picked up some soda earlier, and I was pretty sure it was heating up in my palms. Harris then said in his ever so suave voice, as he wrapped his arm around me, "Yeah, that's true." His hand then traveled down the side of my dress, and he squeezed my stomach. "She is my baby hippo, and I saw all of it." All of it? Excuse me, you mean all of her? I mean, I'm right here. And right about now, I'm regretting even showing up. At this point, all you can hear is laughter. Then their conversation really took off. I mean, it went from 0 to 100 really quick. He spilled the honey and told his friends, all 5 people, about how Harris and myself spent some quality time together, if you know what I mean. He said some off-putting comments about my body and the parts that he wanted to touch. I was trying so hard not to cry, since this could have just been a harmless joke on their part. Needless to say, I wasn't having any of it, so I excused myself, not to go to the bathroom, but to go home. I called my dad to pick me up and to not let Harris's dad know that I was leaving. I wasn't even in the area during spring break. My dad flew me to my brother, who was a year younger than me at the time, out to Pennsylvania to have a vacation. We went to Hershey's chocolate factory and all of that, and I actually had a chance to clear my head. And as far as I can remember, this was the last time my dad was actually pleased with me. When we returned in 10 days, Harris popped in for a visit at a time that he knew my dad wouldn't be home. But my brother was home, playing Minecraft on his PC in his room like he usually does. Now, I thought Harris visited to apologize for the whole baby hippo thing, but honestly, I was grossly mistaken. He ended up hitting me in the gut. I've never been hit before until now, and it was truly horrible. Not only did it hurt like crazy, but it almost made me puke, and it knocked the wind out of me at the same time. He then grabbed me by the shoulders and shouted at me. He said that I shouldn't have left on prom, and how I shouldn't have embarrassed him in front of his friends, and that I should have called him when I was in Pennsylvania. My brother came running down the stairs when he heard all the commotion. I had this urge to bend over and stay bent over, so I couldn't really focus on him. All I know is that he went after Harris, cussing, shouting, and crying. I ran the other way the best I could, trying to breathe first and foremost. It was hard to do anything, or even think straight with this horrible taste in my mouth and nasal cavity. cavity, like I'd already thrown up inside my nose or something like that. It was gross and it was certainly upsetting me. Going for my phone was honestly difficult, since Harris had already found his way away from my brother, begging me not to call the cops. I almost got to the landline too, but Harris snatched it from my hand. He broke the cover, took out the batteries, and then proceeded to beg again. This time he didn't touch me, and I told him to get out. So I ended up having to clean up the house so that my dad wouldn't see any of this. This was going to be my first and last fight with Harris, or so I hoped. But at least he didn't check the landline. My brother was more injured and certainly devastated. He couldn't even ask if I was okay, but I think that he knew that I wasn't, making me want to cry even more. I honestly really looked up to Harris. Now fast forward about 5 hours, and it's 10 p.m. and I'm still seething. We found out that my brother had sprained his wrist, so we rigged up some sort of easy to remove ice thing for his wrist. My dad was a hard man, so I knew he would get upset at first if he saw the mess that we had gotten into. I can't remember what my intention was, whether I was going to tell him about Harris or not, but I knew that he would be back the day after, so I had to exact my revenge right now. So I shut the doors, my windows, and I waited for my brother to go to sleep. And it's right about then that I decided to get to work. I shimmied into the other set of beekeeper clothing, which is the one that my mom would wear. I got the veil, the gloves, the boots, everything. When it comes to bees, you absolutely have to be prepared. Now that night was pretty cold, and it felt very unreal because I was packing thousands of honeybees, moving them around until I got the right number of frames, and all right under my dad's nose. And I was doing this because my plan was to release them on a living human being. We had roughly 30,000 bees per beehive, totaling to about 150 hives. And like I said, it was a side business, and we really needed the honey. I knew at the time that 1,000 or so bee stings could take somebody out, if you know what I mean, and I wasn't planning on going to jail anytime soon. But instead, I was just gonna make sure that this hurt like crazy. So I isolated a fair number of bees between 2 frames with a bit of difficulty, and in total there were about 900 of them. Now, not all of them would sting, but I wanted to get back at him for everything. I mean, who punches their baby hippo, right? Once I had my bees in place, I set the single frame in its own hive closer to home. I then called Harris, and I told him that I wanted to work some things out with him. No violence, none of that stuff. I lied through my teeth, telling him that I won't tell my dad, and that I was doing all right. He then showed up about 5 minutes later and stepped up to my door. The porch light was the only thing illuminating him, and the rest of the place was dark. And that's when I decided to strike. I removed the frames from the hive. I walked up behind him, beekeeper boots squeaking on the steps, with the frames in my hand. I said to him, "Hi, Harris," and I thought it would sound cool, but I was crying. My voice was broken. But voice breaking was the least of Harris's problems at the moment, as I was holding 2 open frames with almost 1,000 bees. Some of them were flying around, but I was fully protected. But unfortunately, Harris wasn't so protected. I swatted him with one of the frames and thrusted the other one against his mouth, hoping that I could at least have a single bee between his lips. A single bee sting hurts like crazy, and will hurt for quite a while. But the thing about bees is that they are part of a true hive mind. If a single bee passes away, all the other bees in the area go into defense mode, stinging at whatever flesh they can find just to push off whatever attacked them. That way they can protect their hive. And the frame I hit Harris with would most likely take out a few of them. The resulting scream was insane. I had never heard him scream before. I almost expected the bees to fly away and hide in some other hive, but no. When bees defend, they really defend. It didn't help that Harris wore short sleeves and had his neck and face exposed, so the bees went for that. Unfortunately for him, none of the bees went inside his mouth like I intended. They were too stupid and wouldn't do that. But instead, they just kept stinging him. I ended up falling down the stairs and scrambling into the dark, looking to get away from him. Looking back though, he was in no position to fight. And sure, I shouldn't have run away, but I did. And I got to watch him try to fight his way through a cloud of bees. Now, when it comes to aftermath, no, he did not pass away. But it did take forever for him to recover, and he was pockmarked by scars. And while I did actually spend some time in jail, I wasn't sentenced. My dad was extremely upset at me for using bees as a weapon, and I am currently in the process of working off that payment. My dad doesn't look at me the same anymore, and I feel really bad about that, and honestly, I wish I'd just gone to him first. But in the end, my ex-boyfriend got exactly what he deserved. That might be the craziest form of revenge I've ever heard in my life. Like, this lady literally threw 1,000 bees at their boyfriend as a form of revenge instead of, I don't know, calling the police. Like, first and foremost, that was awful. Your ex-boyfriend really could have passed away. Like, that could have taken him out completely. And I seriously think that you got very lucky. That guy's gonna have permanent scars for the rest rest of his life. So it kind of makes sense why you went to jail for a little bit. Now, don't get me wrong, your ex-boyfriend is awful. He was mocking you very clearly behind your back to all of his friends, and he punched you in the stomach. And this is all because you stood him up at prom and supposedly embarrassed him. But it's so backwards. Like, I would have left if I was in your shoes. There is no way I would let somebody make fun of me like that, who I thought was my significant other, and just take that from all of his friends calling me a baby hippo or whatever. Like, that's crazy to me. You did not deserve that, and he had no right to go into your house and attack you like that. As well as your poor little brother, I feel really bad for him as well, because he was probably just trying to defend his sister. But boy, did you escalate this in a way that I don't think anybody could have expected. Like, this is something you would see straight out of like a Stephen King novel. Oh, so my boyfriend hit me and humiliated me in front of his friends? Time to throw 1,000 bees at him. Like, that is seriously a crazy escalation. And in my opinion, I really think you should have just like called the police and reported him. Like, all of this could have been avoided. You wouldn't have some crazy fine and you wouldn't have gone to jail. I don't know, maybe that's just me. I just don't think swinging bees around like a hammer is a really good idea. Even though your ex-boyfriend was an absolute piece of work, and he was more than ready to cash that karma check. So hopefully you're able to move on from this and you're able to pay off the fine or whatever else you need to do. Because this is definitely one of the craziest stories of revenge I've ever heard in my life. And hopefully nothing like this ever happens again.
If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. An angry old man storms into the back of my store looking for a manager, enraged that his card isn't working at the gas pump. And I've never been more blown away by someone's entitlement and actions in my life. Here's what happened. Years ago, I worked at the biggest gas station in the state of Connecticut, and I had the job for almost 10 years. So as you can imagine, I have all kinds of stories from my experiences. But the one that I always remember was from this one old man. Now, if you use your credit or debit card at the pump 3 times in 48 hours, it would no longer work at the pump for security reasons, but it would work inside. And this was just in case someone stole your card and was on a spending spree or something like that. And trust me, it was always old people that would stick their card in unaware it was accepted 3 times in a row and didn't realize the pump was ready, because it wouldn't let you select your grade of gas until you picked up the nozzle. And for some reason, this always confused people. Anyways, this guy comes in and he's probably in his 90s, and he's walking in looking absolutely enraged. He asked me why his card isn't working, and I attempted to explain this to him, but I always got the same response.
But I haven't used it 3 times in 48 hours.
So I then have to explain, yes, you inserted it 3 times in a row, and this will lock you out. I then try to segue the conversation away from this guy screaming at me, and I just ask him, how much gas do you want? We can take care of it right now. But he just says, I want it to all fill up. And all these older people always want to fill their tanks, which is fine. So I explained to him that he can leave the card with me, and I can let him fill his tank up. And at this point, he's freaking out because he says he can't walk back and forth due to his handicap. I then try to say, sir, that's not my fault. But he says to me,
yes, it is. You work here.
He then, of course, asks to talk to the manager. So I tell him that I am the manager, even though I definitely am not. But this old man wasn't taking that for a second. He then storms to the back of the store looking for a manager. My assistant manager was actually stocking the cooler, but thankfully he didn't find him, because trust me, my coworker wouldn't have given him even the time of day. I then yell out, sir, you shouldn't be walking back and forth like this if you're handicapped. And when I said that, this guy got so angry he didn't even know what to do with himself. He ended up leaving after totally losing it. I don't even remember what he said. He was just so angry. And out of the hundreds of thousands of customers I rang out, I remember him the most for some reason. Now, I would have felt bad for this guy. I really would have, because I could tell that he was having a difficult time walking, but that guy was a jerk. So honestly, any sympathy went straight out the window. Wow, I can't imagine working the front desk at some kind of store, whether it's a gas station or some kind of retail job, and then have some guy literally storm into the back of your store looking for a manager all over their card not working at the pump. Like, seriously, this guy needs to take a break. He needs to take a breather and just calm down. He can literally still fill up his tank. Like, I know if I was in his shoes, I would have been like, go ahead and fill up your tank and then honk the horn of your car and I'll bring your card out to you or something like that. And I would even bring the receipt out so he doesn't think I'm trying to steal money from him. So yeah, I don't blame you for not having sympathy for this guy, because I personally know people just like this old man who have trouble walking and can't get around as easily as they used to. But they don't act like this in the slightest. In fact, they're quite pleasant to be around and they don't complain about the limitations they have. So overall, this is definitely not your fault. And that old man was being a massive jerk. My entitled manager never does anything incorrectly at our job and is so lazy and condescending. So I decide to maliciously comply when he tells me to do one of the easiest jobs he has on his desk. And as a result of me purposefully doing it wrong, my manager got in trouble and the owner of our company never let him ever live it down. Here's what happened. So a few years ago, I worked at an exotic car dealership. We were the largest in the world for our brand, which will remain nameless for this post. And the exotic car side was run by one of the owners, a manager who we will call Jim, as well as two others my age who did most of the grunt work with me. Jim also is not his real name. We sold cars in all 50 US states and would ship them wherever they needed to go. We all worked on every deal and were paid off the profit of the dealership, not individual sales. Now, Jim was a major kiss up to the owner who oversaw our department. He wasn't good at his job, but he was good at playing the game needed to stay on the owner's good side. He treated myself and the younger guys like absolute garbage and tried to do as little work as humanly possible. He was openly racist, he would make horrible comments about women, and knew literally nothing about the cars that we sold or their main competition. Now, Jim's main responsibility was to send out all paperwork to customers and make sure that everything was set up so that we could release the car. A big part of this was making sure the car was registered before shipping it out if they financed through the manufacturer's financial arm. And most people did that just for the slight discount. This often meant sending all registration paperwork to the customer to go register it locally. And Jim was the only one allowed to do this, as our manager had inherent distrust for the younger guys, even though we genuinely did great work. I mean, you don't get to #1 in the world for your brand if we weren't doing a good job in some kind of way. Well, when the owner wasn't there, Jim would often do nothing all day and then send some paperwork right before the end of the day. And on that day, things came to a head. He spent the morning shopping for pellet smokers and a cruise for his family to go on, and kept interrupting me to show me the different options he was looking at. Meanwhile, I was handling 2 in-person deliveries, as well as dealing with the entire showroom traffic. Well, long story short, the end of the day rolls around, and he didn't get the paperwork sent out, so he looked at me and told me to do it. But I explained that the owner made it clear that he's the only one allowed to send the paperwork out for registration. But he threw a fit and demanded that I throw the paperwork out. So that's exactly what I did. Now, the title needs to be filled out with the information from the financing company, and if you don't do that, they'll have no claim to that car, and the registration won't match. So I sent the blank title out to the customer, knowing that this meant they couldn't just sign it and register it like they were planning to do in the first place. Well, the customer noticed and asked my manager why he left the lien holder off the title, but forwarded this email to our entire department. The owner saw this and freaked out, shouting at my manager, saying, "How could you mess this up? It was so simple," which then led to my manager having to admit that he interrupted my actual work to make me send it out, while not clarifying that he hadn't even filled out the title yet, and that I had to do that. They then sent an overnight envelope to the customer to send it back to us. Then we had to overnight it again once we filled it out. Jim then got an earful from the owner, and the owner never let him live it down. Eventually, I quit and moved into software sales, and honestly, I'll never work in a dealership ever again. Yeah, that Jim guy's a piece of work. I can't stand dealing with managers who are over me, who not only don't do their job, but also don't even make an effort to learn how to do the things around them. They're only in that position because they played the game and not because they're skilled at their job. And in my opinion, if you're gonna be a manager, you need to know what you're doing. You need to know the ins and outs of your department and not just sit around on your phone or on the computer looking up cruises you can go on. Like, this Jim guy absolutely had it coming. And the fact that you were able to maliciously comply and get this guy back is honestly hilarious, because people like this absolutely deserve to be put in their place. Because at the end of the day, I really do think people like this are just leeches on society, and they really need that kick in the pants to either get to work or get out of the way. This next one came from the Am I the Jerk subreddit. Check the links in the description if you would like to submit your own story. Am I the jerk for ignoring a Karen who was getting angry at me vacuuming while I was at work? Here's what happened. So for a bit of background information, this is my first job, and I've been working at this gym for about 2 months. I came into work at about 3:25 like usual. I start unlocking doors, and at this point, I'm the only one there. So I unlock all the doors and start the laundry like I'm supposed to, and then I start up the computer. And by then, it's about 3:30, so it's right about the time that I should start working. By then, an older woman had come in and started on the treadmill. I knew that since we were open 24/7, there would be people most days, and I just had to try and work around them. So I grab the vacuum out of storage, and I plug it into the wall by the towels, and I start vacuuming. I'd gotten no further than 2 minutes in when I hear the lady on the the treadmill starts shouting. So I turn off the vacuum and I ask her what's wrong. She continues shouting and says, "Why are you doing that while I'm here?" I calmly tell her, "Ma'am, this is my job." She then interrupts me and starts shouting, "I don't care. You can clean when you guys close." Now, I stay calm and I tell her that we are open 24/7 and that we never close. And also that I have to do this or I don't get paid. Meanwhile, this lady is still shouting at me, "I doubt you even work here. Where's the employee?" Now, for context, I'm 5 foot tall, so I knew this was coming. I calmly tell her, "Ma'am, I'm an employee here and I work until 6:30 today." She then yells at me to just vacuum when she leaves and tells me to do something quieter until then. But I tell her that without vacuuming, I can't do anything else that's mandatory for the day. And by now, she's done listening to me, so I just start vacuuming again. I can hear her shouting at me to stop, but I've already been talking to her for an hour by now. So I just ignored it, knowing that I'm gonna be here past 6:30 working anyways. So honestly, am I the jerk for doing my job and vacuuming while some entitled Karen was at our gym? No, you are not the jerk here. That lady was being weird for literally no reason. And if part of doing your job is like housekeeping and vacuuming and cleaning up or stuff like that, then you just have to do it. And you know what? You cleaning and taking care of the place does not take away from her ability to work out and get in shape. Like seriously, why does she care? Like if you don't like the noise of other people around you, then maybe go buy some earbuds or something like that and use that to listen to music. Like that Karen was being completely obnoxious. And honestly, in my opinion, I don't think you did anything wrong. My entitled coworker tries to falsely claim that I've been stealing from the store, but I refuse to take that sitting down. So I decided to get some revenge. And as a result, I exposed this entitled coworker for being the actual thief in this scenario. And as a result, he ended up spending 6 years in jail. And I've never been happier to expose somebody in my life. Here's what happened. Now, before I go any further, every name in this story is fake. So I work as a computer technician now, but when I was in college, I worked part-time at a well-known chain cafe. And for the sake of the story, we'll call this place Seattle's finest. Other than babysitting or odd one-off under-the-table work, helping at friends' booths at Renaissance fairs or stuff like that, this honestly was my first job. My manager, Eliza, had aspirations for rising in the company at a corporate level, so she was obsessed about making our store the absolute best. At the same time, though, she wasn't an especially effective manager at the store level. She didn't really know how to make all the drinks and had to constantly refer to the recipe cards, even though she was supposed to be an expert on everything. She also didn't really care to learn, which meant that during a busy rush, she could never step in and help us out in making drink orders. Instead, she would just hide in the back office near the kitchen. However, she had a college degree, and our company's policy, at least at the time, was that only college degree holders could be the full manager of the store. She left the day-to-day running of the store to a man by the name of Steven, the lead shift supervisor who had been working at that location for nearly 25 years. I mean, he's worked here since he was 16 years old. He claims that the only reason he's not a manager is because he doesn't have a college degree, and he never got tired of reminding all the workers that this store would go down the drain if he wasn't around. Steven didn't really have much to do other than delegate others to do things and make sure that orders were sent out to suppliers and to sign those orders in when they arrived. Our store followed standard company practice, and so a fixed amount of supplies was usually ordered in every day, with only slight variations to account for specific store needs. Now, Steven also wrote the schedule every week. When I was hired on, Eliza was the one who interviewed me, and she assured me that I would get at least 20 hours a week with 4-hour shifts, and I would only work Saturdays on the weekend and not Sundays. Now, during my 2-week training period, she kept her word. I would hover right around 18 to 22 hours a week, and my hours would basically be about the same. But after that, once I was fully trained, she passed me over to Steven. And it's right about at this point that the nightmare involving Steven really began, as this guy started to act shady in a way that I honestly didn't expect. Steven followed Eliza's pattern for a week or so, but soon he began trying to schedule me in the mornings, which I couldn't do because of school. He'd pretend to get angry and really disappointed, and basically talk down to me in the process. He would say, "In my 25 years with the company, one of the first things you learn is to be a team player." Well, I thought that was great, but I still couldn't work in the mornings. So he just grumbled and said, "I'll have to talk to Eliza to see what we have to do about you." Now, she would only occasionally show up to the store. Usually she was there at about mid-morning and left well before closing. Steven would always open the store and would constantly brag about opening the store up for more than 20 years. Steven would try to suck up to customers and at the same time condescend us in front of them. He would say to them, "Forgive her, she's new. I mean, you see what I have to work with? They're just basic recruits." Sometimes he would literally just outright call us idiots if we couldn't clean things up fast enough, or if we were slow in making drinks. Like, he'd be hanging out in the back counting boxes. Meanwhile, it's 12 o'clock on a Saturday, and I'm running the register and making all the drinks, plus our line is 10 people deep, with him sending my other worker off to lunch and him refusing to try and help me out. He would tell me that I need to have my baptism by fire. I mean, seriously, he took himself way too seriously. He also thought that he was special because he spoke fluent Spanish. Since he worked in the morning, a lot of people who had early morning jobs would come in, and many of them spoke Spanish only, so he somehow thought it was his specialty that he could communicate with them. Well, my father is from Spain, and I happen to speak fluent Spanish myself as well. So one Saturday when I opened the store with him, I started speaking Spanish to one of the customers, and the customer complimented me on how well I spoke the language. And when they said that, it looked like Steven was going to absolutely take me out. Whenever customers would come in who spoke Spanish, rather than let me communicate with them, Steven would suddenly get off of his butt and say something like, "Oh, it's okay, I'll handle this." As time went on, Steven would only schedule me for 8 hours a week, like closing Friday night and opening Saturday morning. I thought to myself, whatever, I'll just start applying for other jobs, and I won't tell him that I'm doing that on the side. Now, I knew that he was giving all of the hours to his favorites. Usually, it was the young girl who tried to flirt with him. And I know this because he tried the same thing with me at first. He said that he could give me more hours, but apparently I had to play ball. Now, this was nothing that I could actually prove in court, but he was hinting that if I go out with him, he would give me more hours. But honestly, no thanks, man. You're gross and you're married. Well, Eliza was up for promotion for district manager, which meant that she would oversee 5 or 6 of the coffee shops instead of just one. However, in a whole team meeting one special Sunday, she said that our store consistently was losing product. She warned us to stop giving discounts to friends, to stop giving away free cookies or snacks to friends, stuff like that. She also said that if we planned to have some of the pastries for ourselves, that we had to make sure to write it down on the store use board. And just as a side note, we were allowed a certain amount of free products depending on the hours that we worked. Now, at least during the hours that I worked at this store, I never witnessed anyone giving away any free products, and I certainly wasn't using it for myself. I mean, no one was giving any of that stuff away. That is, with the obvious exception of Steven. Steven got a bonus every time the store use board was below a certain threshold, and he would always accuse us of stealing or giving away things. In fact, he said so at the meeting. He said, "This shrinkage is caused by these rookies who think that a company runs on fees. But it's a business based on cold, hard money, and we're bleeding it out when we steal products or give it away." Meanwhile, I always noticed Steven giving free discounts to certain customers, as well as constantly giving things away. One of those situations where it's a rule you have to follow, but it's not one that he has to follow. And another worker actually asked him about it, and he actually said that managers had certain privileges. But seriously, dude, you're not a manager. You make $3 more an hour than me, and you've spent your entire life here. He also resented the fact that most of us who worked in the store were college students who would eventually move on someday to something hopefully more financially profitable. Steven would do this working class hero bit where he would talk about how college people were snobs, that they didn't know how to do real work, and that they were just lazy and privileged. He also mocked me for majoring in computing as a female and accused me of just trying to get my MRS degree. And he acted like he was kidding, but honestly, he was just being really slimy. Then he would go right back to his same speech about how business people's whole day would collapse without people like him, and that he's starting their day off correctly by giving them coffee. He would say stuff like, "I'm as indispensable to a large corporation as a CEO." Now, meanwhile, we're all thinking, okay, calm down, Steven. You're a shift supervisor at a suburban coffee shop, and you wear an apron with your name embroidered on it. It's not like you're curing cancer, buddy. Anyways, Eliza's promotion depended on our store reducing its shrinkage. And on a date a few days from our Sunday meeting, company bigwigs would come to the store and check out how well Eliza ran things. So we were told to look sharp. The bigwigs would be in the dining room chatting with Eliza, while the rest of us who were scheduled that day tried to look our best. Steven didn't really have any incentive to make Eliza look good, because as long as he kept overall shrinkage beneath a certain number, he would get his stupid bonus. But that threshold was still too high for Eliza to get her promotion. And also, it's not like Steven would become the next manager if Eliza got promoted. The company would simply get a new manager as an outside hire. Informally, we would call Steven the assistant manager, but the company did not officially recognize him in this capacity. Now, since he was a longtime worker and worked full-time, he did get health benefits and a 2-week vacation. The rest of us lowly part-timers just got a store discount and some free food or drink while working. We got paid every 2 weeks, but we got tips every single week. If you've never worked at a coffee shop like Seattle's Finest or anything like that, customers would throw money into a jar at the register if they felt like being generous. The tips would be emptied out every night, and eventually at the end of the week, all the money would be parceled out to all the workers, depending on the hours that they worked. Since I only worked a few hours, my tips were small. But you know what? At least it paid for my laundry. Now, my school starts a couple of hours after the store opens, and since I wasn't burning too much energy working, I would get up nice and early every day. The store was close to my apartment after all, and I always walked there. It was the time of year where the moon was still out early in the morning, and I decided that I'd walk to the store to get my tips for that week. I approached the store from the alley entrance, but I intended to enter through the front. The store policy was that you could only enter the back way if you were scheduled to work. As usual at that hour, our daily supply truck was pulling out of the alley, and there was a huge stack of daily supplies in crates outside the back door. Steven propped open the back door with a trash can and was carrying one crate in at a time into the store's back room. My first instinct was to try and help him out, but then I remembered that I wasn't being paid. And besides that, Steven was a complete jerk. I was fascinated watching him as he worked, because usually he was such a lazy jerk. I was hidden just out of sight by the cars and the trees, so there was no way that he could see me. He stopped working, but there was still a crate left at the back door. It was filled with what looked to be croissants and random boxes of granola bars. In addition to coffee and pastries, our store also sold third-party nutrition bars, the kind where you can buy a box of 6 for like $4 at the grocery store, but we would charge you $2.99 for each one. He was talking on a cell phone, and only a minute or two later, a beat-up car pulls into the alleyway. The driver pops the trunk, and Steven puts the crate into the car, and the car speeds off. Steven then goes back into the store, and when I saw that, I was honestly completely shocked. At first, I tried to rationalize what I had seen. Maybe it was just a work-related thing that I didn't understand because I wasn't a shift supervisor or something like that. Maybe the person in the car was from another store, and our store was supposed to send those items to them. Either way, I decided to forget my tips for the time being and just walk back home. By the time I got there, I realized that it was most likely that Steven was just a thief. I went to school and I forgot about it for a few hours, but every now and then my memory would come back to what I saw. So the next morning I wake up and I made sure I had my cell phone ready. I waited outside really early in the morning, even before the supply truck came in. When it did come in, sure enough, Steven did the same song and dance as the day before. He left one crate outside, coordinated with his accomplice on his phone, the same car arrived, and it pulled away after Steven packed its trunk with stolen goodies. Now, I thought I was being really slick in recording the scene, but later when I reviewed what I had, it was way too dark and unclear of what was going on. And if I tried to get a closer look and try to get a better picture where there's more light, Steven would see me and my cover would be blown. So anyways, I actually worked that day because it was a Saturday, and Steven was his usual jerk self. But hearing him banter with customers, it reminded me of other pieces of other conversations that I overheard from him over the past few weeks. Steven had a side business, or at least his wife did, and they would sell snacks outside of clubs or sporting events. I put 2 and 2 together, and I realized that if Steven even stole just one crate and sold all of its items at a massive discount, he would still make a pretty penny, and all of it would be complete profit. And he had stolen a crate 2 days in a row. I mean, who knew how many crates he had stolen in the past? I realized that if I told Eliza, she would not believe me, and Steven would completely deny it. So my only option was to try and catch him red-handed. The approach I had been making to the alley was simply too far away to record him without being observed. But I also saw that there was an apartment complex on the other side of the alley. If I could somehow get into that apartment complex, all I'd have to do is quietly hold my phone over the brick wall, and it would be close enough to record him perfectly. And you know what? That's exactly what I did. Staking out Steven stealing became my morning ritual for a week. Out of 4 days, he stole a crate 3 times, and each time I had him recorded. And I wasn't scheduled to come in until an afternoon the next week. Now, all I needed to do was show Eliza my phone, and I would finally nail this jerk. Unfortunately, she wouldn't be in the store for a while either. But then it hit me. I remembered that the big company meeting regarding Eliza's promotion was coming up that Monday afternoon, just a couple days days later. I wasn't scheduled to work, but I knew I could talk my way into the back room with some kind of excuse, like I needed my paycheck or something like that. Our back room has a computer where we clock in and out. It's just one window on the screen, and if you click out of it, you have access to the rest of the company's functions. One thing the company always has running in the background is what we call Store TV. It was basically just a series of short infomercials about how wonderful Seattle's finest coffee was, how our beans are from plantations where workers are treated humanely, how we donate to underprivileged communities, offer funding to women in STEM, and stuff like that. The file was stored as a WMV file, and the store just played it on a continuous loop. Every so often, Eliza would obtain a new set of infomercials, and we would then loop those out. Our store had one big screen mounted from the ceiling, which faced out into the store away from the registers. My plan was to upload my video of Steven stealing onto the store computer itself. I had the files, which I combined at home into one big file of 3 different occasions, where you could clearly see his face and the face of the woman driving the car, who I'm assuming is his wife, while also showcasing how they're clearly stealing product from the store. Eliza and the big bosses were already there at the restaurant, so the sensible thing for me to do would be to just interrupt Eliza and just blatantly hold up my cell phone and show her the video. But you know what? I love a bit of drama, and Steven absolutely had this coming. So I see Eliza with her colleague sitting at a table near the registers, and this is also where Steven is standing with that awful grin on his face, sucking up to the people in front of him. I mean, honestly, the store really wasn't that crowded. Eliza sees me when I come in, and she then says to all of us, as if to project that she does love her staff, "Oh, everyone, here's our newest employee. She's going to college for computing." And after she said that, it was followed by a bunch of nods and verbal agreements, as if anyone was actually even caring about what my major was. I smile and I mouth the words that I'm just here for the tips, with Eliza saying, "Oh, of course, no problem." And Steven at this point looks like he just wants to slap me. But you know what? That's too bad. I'm going into the back room whether you like it or not. Now, our tips are placed in little baggies, labeled with the amount in our cubbies in the back room, and we have an honor system of not grabbing anyone else's tips. I grabbed my tips, which was only $11.50, so it wasn't that bad to be completely honest, but then I go straight for the computer. I have my phone's data cable, and I plug it into the USB port of the store computer. I upload the file as planned. I then unclick the looping channel for Seattle's finest, and I switch it to Steven the Thief, and I set the video on continuous loop. I come out into the restaurant, and as usual, no one really cares about the TV, and so I go to Steven and I order a hot latte. Now, Steven looks like he wants to throw me through a window, but he still has that awful grin on his face, literally only because the bosses are there. But he doesn't know that just a few feet above his head, there is a continuous loop of him and his wife stealing products in the alley every morning. I had made sure to include a time and date stamp on the videos when editing. He already had some hot milk ready, and all he had to do was pull 2 espresso shots, so I had my drink in about 30 seconds. I pulled out my wallet, but uncharacteristically, he smiled at me and waved me off. Eliza saw me and nodded in approval. Then I sat at a table not far from where the bosses were sitting. Above Steven's head, his video was playing silently. And finally, I got the payoff that I waited for. One of the bosses said, "Say, Eliza, isn't that our company video of our donations to minority scholarships? What is that?" Eliza, as well as everybody else, looks at the video. And right about then, everybody's mouths were hanging open. The only person still grinning like a complete moron was Steven, standing there completely oblivious. Finally, Eliza stands up and says, "Steven, can you explain what's going on here, please?" Steven looks at the video and looked like he was going to run out of the room like Usain Bolt. He didn't do or say anything other than run into the back room. Seconds later, the video stopped, and a few minutes later, it began playing again. And I did that because I knew Steven would try something weird. What I did was I deleted the correct video and made a duplicate of the videos I made and renamed it as if it was the store's looping channel. Everyone in the dining room was once again treated to a loop of Steven and his wife stealing an entire crate of designer granola bars and pastries repeatedly. One of the big bosses said, "Eliza, let's close the store right now. Young lady, I'm sorry, but it looks like you have to go." And honestly, who was I to argue? I walked home with $11.50, but it felt like $1,000,000. A couple days later, I get a call from corporate thanking me for the information about Steven. And unfortunately, they couldn't give me any details about what happened, as this now had become a police matter. But as a thank you, I received $200 in store credit. Fast forward to a few days later, and I come in to find neither Eliza or Steven at the restaurant. And one of my coworkers told me me that she heard that Steven was arrested for theft, both he and his wife. Eliza ended up getting her promotion because it was proven that the only reason her store had moderately high shrinkage was because Steven was literally stealing from the store. However, because she was supposed to be keeping a close eye on Steven, she's being watched very carefully to ensure that she's actually a good employee. And you know what? That's fair. She wasn't a thief, but she should have been keeping a closer eye on her store. I mean, if she's gonna get a full-time salary, but only show up for a few hours, that in my opinion is so unacceptable. As for me, the new manager got me my final check because I quit. I went and applied for a job on campus at my school's off-brand coffee shop. It was basically the same job, a few jerks here or there, but I did end up making $1 more an hour as a result. As time went on, I graduated school. I did eventually learn that Steven was not only stealing product, but also he was embezzling tips and tampering with the time clock to reduce people's hours and give himself more. Steven ended up going to jail for 6 years, but his wife got a suspended sentence because they had 2 children under the age of 13. Now, I learned this because the company I work for actually did tech service for Seattle's finest corporate office, which is exactly where Eliza works now. She remembered me, and over the finest coffee in all of Seattle, she told me the whole story of how Steven was eventually taken down. Wow, that is awesome. First off, let's double down about something. This Steven guy was a complete creep. He was basically saying, if you spend time with me on a date, I'll give you more hours. That is so sketchy and so messed up. So it honestly doesn't surprise me that this guy was not only stealing products, but also embezzling tips and tampering time clocks to give himself more hours. Like seriously, what was this guy thinking? I mean, this guy probably stole like thousands of dollars worth of product. There's no way this was the first time he ever did this. And on top of that, he had the audacity to try and blame you and your coworkers. Like, I'm sorry, why would the part-time employee have any time to try and steal from the store? And if there really is some kind of shrinkage in sales, you're not gonna find that in taking like the occasional donut outside the display. Like seriously, come on, that's so ridiculous. So honestly, good for the original poster for taking this guy down, because this guy was a complete jerk, and he absolutely deserved to get taken down. An entitled Kevin and Karen couple demand that I remove my prosthetic because they're disturbed by it and claim that it's inappropriate to have on in a children's hospital. And I've honestly never been more offended by somebody's remarks in my life. Here's what happened. So for a bit of background, I'm a 24-year-old male, and I'm half deaf on my left side due to a birth defect. I also have a misshaped ear due to a combination of birth defects as well as because of surgeries to repair it. When I got a bit older, I started wearing a prosthetic ear on that side to cover it up. It wasn't perfect, but it looked better than what I originally had. Unfortunately though, these types of prosthetics don't last forever, and they have to be replaced every so often as the colors begin to fade and it tears around the edges. And this is one of those prosthetics that is removable. I was due for a new one and was just waiting on my insurance to approve it before the prosthetist was going to send it to me. So anyways, I was working in a pediatric emergency room at the time and had just received the order to perform an EKG on a roughly 8 to 10-year-old patient. When I walked into the room and began to introduce myself to the family, namely the mom and the dad and the patient, the mother looked up at me and made a gasping sound. I was taken aback and asked her what was wrong. She told me, "Your ear is really freaking me out. Is this supposed to be some kind of Halloween costume or something like that? It really seems inappropriate for a children's hospital." Now, mind you, it was only October 2nd or October 3rd, but I explained to her that I have a disability for which I have to wear a prosthetic. She then demanded and said to me, "You need to take it off because it's making me uncomfortable." After she said that, I politely declined because it's held on by medical glue and that is really not easy to take off. I proceeded to do my job and perform the EKG, but throughout the entire procedure, the father decided to repeatedly probe me for personal information. He would ask me things like, "Are you sure you're qualified to do this? How long did you go to school before this job?" And stuff like that. Now, I answered his questions, but could very obviously tell that he was insinuating that I was mentally disabled and that I shouldn't be working in this field. I finished the procedure as quickly as I could and then I left, not saying anything to the parents, but I did wish the child well. I gave the report to the nurse and asked her not to call me for this patient unless they absolutely needed to. I kept my mouth shut at the time, but in retrospect, I wish I had spoken up for myself more. Because honestly, some people just have no respect for those with disabilities. Wow, the mom and dad in that story were awful. Like seriously, why can't they just mind their own business? First and foremost, like who in their right mind would audibly gasp when they see something that doesn't look right? Like does she do that when she sees someone with like a fake leg or a fake arm?
Like, come on, lady, you can't be that weird, can you? And the fact that she was trying to demand that this person take it off, like seriously, that medical glue is very strong. It's not gonna come off very easily, and it's probably gonna be hard if he just rips it off. Like, why can't people just mind their own business and keep their comments to themselves? She really tried to sit there and be like, oh my gosh, this is bad for a children's hospital, and yet she's the only one who even complained about it in the first place. And then for the dad to try and sit there and be like, well, how long have you been doing this? Do you even know what you're doing? Like, honestly, what a dumb question. Especially with their kid just getting an EKG. It's not like this guy was performing surgery or something like that. Like, calm down. But honestly, this is just so awful, and I'm so sorry to the original poster for dealing with this. Because you know what? You worked hard to get through school to get in the position that you're in. And the last thing you need are a bunch of entitled parents telling you that you're not capable, all because of a disability. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Am I the jerk for ruining a wedding by unexpectedly soiling myself? Here's what happened. So my friend Sarah was getting married, and I was lucky enough to be in her wedding party. I wasn't the maid of honor, but I was one of the bridesmaids. She had an outdoor wedding that had limited bathroom availability. Obviously, because it was outdoors, she rented 4 very high quality porta potties that you might see at a sophisticated outdoors event like tennis or polo. There were 2 for women and 2 for men, and the wedding in total was about 200 people. Now, I should also mention that due to some health problems, I started taking a medication that has the possible side effect of going to the bathroom and doing a number 3, if you know what I mean. When you look up medicines which have a million side effects, you might tend to just think that, well, these medicines just have to say that you might get this. But it's one of those situations where either way, despite whatever side effects might come along, I still need to take the medication. Now, I didn't think to mention this to anyone for a number of reasons. For starters, the medicine side effects vary depending on what it is, so who knows what could happen. But also, how on earth would I explain this to her? Like, what am I actually gonna say to her before the wedding? Am I really gonna have to explain that I'm taking this medication and that it might have side effects in general? I mean, I've never struggled with IBS or anything like that in the past, so instead I just didn't say anything. So anyways, it's a little while before the ceremony is about to start, and I'm pulled into a million directions helping out, and I start to feel a bit of a stomach ache. And then we all get shuffled up to the front without any warning. But I think to myself, whatever, I'm at the wedding. I can't go run out for some Tums, I mean, it'll be fine. Eventually, the music starts to play and everything is in place. All of the sudden, I feel a deep pain in my bowels. For 20 seconds, I'm just standing there thinking, do I really have to go? What do I do? Is this seriously happening? I was literally just trying to process the situation while remaining as composed as possible. But it didn't matter, because in that very moment, it happened. Now, I'm not gonna go into detail here because it was embarrassing and traumatizing, but needless to say, I definitely excused myself. And I think you have a good idea of what just happened. After dealing with the whole situation, I was there standing outside the bathroom, not sure what to do next. I had assumed the ceremony had continued to go on, but do I even go back? I mean, there's no way, right? They're in the middle of their vows, and here comes the girl who just went to the bathroom in her pants. So I waited a while as not to interrupt anything. 2 of the other bridesmaids found me crying eventually and told me that Sarah was upset and said that I should leave. And so, in my shame, I did just that. Now, this happened over the weekend, and it's now Tuesday night. I did send an apology text to Sarah, but I haven't heard anything from her or anyone else in the wedding party. But honestly, am I the jerk in this situation? What should I do? First and foremost, I don't think you're the jerk at all. This was a freak accident, and it's not something that you planned on. No one goes to a wedding, or goes anywhere for that matter, and plans on having that happen. So personally, I think the anger and the blame from the bride is being completely misplaced. Like, sure, there was some kind of interruption when it came to your wedding, but honestly, why would you not want to be like, hey, are you okay? Like, that's what I would do if I was in that situation. I would want to check up on my friend and make sure they're okay. And I like the fact that you decided to stay out and stay out of the ceremony. It really was for the best considering what just happened. Do they really want you lurking around the corner, coming back in, smelling awful and being covered in who knows what? Like, I think that would have made the situation a lot worse. Now, I think there is a side of this where you should have been more prepared, and you should have taken the proper steps to be ready for that hour period when she was getting married, but I think overall this was very unpredictable. This has never happened before, and it's not like you did it on purpose. So I'm gonna say that you are not the jerk in this situation. But what do you think? Leave a comment. How would you react if you were in this situation? Let us know in the comments down below. This next one came from the Am I the Jerk podcast subreddit. Check the links in the description if you would like to submit your own story. Am I the jerk for getting upset after my mom misplaced and threw away my cosplay
items. Here's what happened. So I am currently a first-year senior high school student, and I love cosplay in general. I promised my classmates that I would show them in person my favorite casual cosplay of a formal attire with many handcrafted accessories. By the day I prepared everything in my bag, my mom decided to clean my room, which is fair to an extent, it was a mess, and told me to leave it all to her. But here's the thing, I never gave her permission to touch anything from my bags filled with cosplay items. The next day, I checked my bag, only to find out that all of my cosplay items were completely missing. Specifically, a blue custom crafted flower brooch attached to a DIY cape that I attached to a vest and a blue armband I pinned together. I asked my mom if she misplaced it, and she then just told me to look around the house. But when I did, I found nothing. I asked her again, and despite the fact that I hate bothering people, she got irritated and said, "Stop going to the past and change your life." But like, excuse me, are you kidding? This is only a piece of cosplay that I personally crafted and cherished. What does my past have to do with any of this? She then goes on to explain about how my so-called counselors are saying that I should. But what the actual crap does the counselors have to do with my cosplay? I know I'm going through depression and anxiety, but what does it have to do with something that cheers me up and lets me cope with stress? Cosplay has been my most treasured hobby, and hearing that is just BS. This is also the third time she lost my cosplay items, and it's difficult to replicate something I just crafted out of a very specific artificial blue flower. It also was my pride and joy. The fact that she only treated it like a stain of the past and just wanted to throw it away so that I could change was honestly so offensive. What am I supposed to change here? This is who I am, and this is what makes me happy. It's not like what I'm doing is hurting anybody or anything like that. Not only that, she also misplaced the personally written letters by my best friend, which I always kept, by the way, because of how special of a friend he is. But she acts as if it's just some kind of garbage. The fact that she has the audacity to pretend that she even cares is honestly just so disgusting. Like, I literally placed them in a bag. Not just any bag, but my bag, which means that it's my possession. I never even gave her permission to rummage through my items. And then what? She used her role as a mother to make it valid? I mean, honestly, what do you guys think? Am I the jerk in this situation? What should I do? I don't think you're the jerk at all. I don't know about you, but I could never do cosplay. And I'm not talking about dressing up in a costume that I rented from somebody. I'm talking about making the costume myself out of raw materials that I put together. That would be unbelievably difficult, and I wouldn't know where to begin. I have friends who do cosplay themselves, and they make their own items and they make their own gear and dresses and pants and all that stuff. And just from the process alone that they've described, it takes a lot of energy and a lot of time to do this correctly, and to do it in such a way where it's not going to fall apart when you go to a convention or some kind of event. Like, this is something that you absolutely should and can take seriously. It's not just playing dress up. This is cosplay. There's a deeper meaning here and a personal connection to the piece that you're making. So when it comes to the original poster getting upset at their mom, I don't blame you for a second. She was completely out of line to go through your stuff like that and to throw away stuff that she's probably seen you put together. Like, that is honestly so disrespectful, and I'm so sorry you have to deal with that. And sure, you put it in your bag, but maybe it's time to put it in something a little bit more secure. Like, maybe there's a store you can go to get a chest or some kind of box that can be specifically labeled, "Hey, this is cosplay stuff, do not touch." And then let her know, "Hey, I'm gonna keep all my cosplay in this box. If you ever clean my room again in the future, don't go in this box. I want to keep everything in there." And sure, I'm sure you're probably doing that already. You probably have explained this to her many times, but maybe doubling down and redoubling your efforts to protect the things that are important to you will hopefully get through your mother's thick skull that yes, this is important to you, and no, this is not the cause of my depression. If anything, like you described it, this brings you happiness. Like, this hobby is completely harmless and there's no reason you shouldn't be doing it. I mean, if I was a parent, I would definitely feel that way towards my kids doing anything. Oh, they're not hurting anybody and they're enjoying the activity they're doing? Yeah, go ahead and keep doing it. Like, it's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. So no, you are not the jerk in this situation. You didn't do anything wrong. Your mom is incredibly rude and unbelievably toxic for throwing your stuff away, and hopefully in the future that never happens again. My entitled mother demands that I do her special effects makeup for every single Halloween, all without properly paying me. And at this point, I'm so annoyed, and I now don't know what to do. So almost 5 to 6 years ago, I discovered my love and talent in special effects and Halloween makeup. This includes homemade latex wounds, airbrushing, the works. My mom's birthday happens to be October 31st, so it's her tradition to have me do her and my stepdad's makeup usually the weekend of or right before Halloween, and this depends on when the holiday falls in. And they want me to do this so that they can go to a really cool small tourist tourist town that we all love for the day and walk around and take pictures. I have always agreed happily and enjoyed doing this little tradition, that is, until a few years ago. They don't pay me, but they have bought me supplies before as a payment. I also get free labor on any car work because my stepdad is a mechanic. Now, last year for my mom's 50th birthday, we rented an Airbnb so that I could do all of her friends' makeup as well as my own and my wife's, which took me about 6 to 7 hours. Altogether, I did 7 people's makeup. Her friends paid me but did not pay me my hourly rate. And overall, I made about $30. But my hourly rate is $80 an hour. And yes, my mom does know this. Basically, she called it her birthday gift, and the money I did make was just tips from her friends because they wanted to give me something. We went to the tourist town and only stayed for a few hours while also having dinner and then walked around for a little bit. But everyone got tired really early into the night and went back to the Airbnb. So basically, I feel like I did 7 hours of work for only a few hours of fun. So that definitely really annoyed me. Last year, I also had to turn down a big Halloween party and also opportunities to do friends and some acquaintances' makeup, all because of my mom's demands. Now, I say demands because it was implied, and I would get nothing but a tongue lashing if I didn't do this for her. And honestly, I was just really bummed about it. But it was my mom's 50th birthday, so I did want to spend it with her. This year early on, I decided I am not going to do it again. I decided I'm going to do my own Halloween party and do my friend's makeup and actually get paid for it for the first time in 6 years. This year, the parties will be happening on October 28th. My mom just texted me an Airbnb listing and asked if my wife and I wanted to join them again this year on the 28th. I told her that I most likely won't be going because I want an opportunity to go to my own Halloween party. She just replied by typing the letter K, which I know is her annoyed response for not getting her way. She acts petty and passive-aggressive like that every single time I don't do exactly what she wants me to do for her. I've never been able to set any healthy boundaries with my mom. It always needs to be her way, or else she's gonna get upset and annoyed, and will usually start messaging me walls of texts telling me that I really hurt her feelings, and that she doesn't understand why I do certain things. It honestly drives me absolutely insane. Does anyone else deal with this? Like, how do you set boundaries that they finally respect? Also, should I feel obligated to give up my Halloween just because I get free labor from my stepdad? I am just worried that my mom might hold this over my head someday, and at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. First off, you are not being selfish or a jerk for deciding, you know what, I want to spend this Halloween getting paid for my work. That is not a selfish aspiration. That is you wanting to be properly financially compensated for your time. What you do is not easy, because clearly you're good at it, otherwise people wouldn't be asking you to do that for them. So in my opinion, I don't think you're the jerk for wanting to set that boundary, for saying to your mom, listen, I want to do stuff on my own. I want to be able to make money this Halloween and not feel like I'm getting ripped off. Now, when it comes to having healthy boundaries, I think it just comes down to simply saying what you need. Like, we are all adults here. You're in your 30s and your mom is in her 50s. And I think trying to establish some kind of reasonable boundary when it comes to what you will and will not do is something that I think is completely normal. Everyone should be able to do that. And you know what? If your mom wants to hold it over your head just because you don't want to do something, and she wants to try and give you some kind of ultimatum of like, oh, help me with my Halloween decorations and my costume, or your stepdad's not going to help with your car. If she tries that, then just let her, because that kind of garbage is so childish, and there is no reason for you to have to put up with that for a second. So no, you are not the jerk here. You have every right to do whatever you want on Halloween, and if that means you can make some money in the process and actually give your time and effort to people who are going to appreciate it, then in my opinion, that is absolutely a good thing. My dad and stepmother, who treated me so horribly growing up, are now on the verge of being homeless, and despite calling me up, I'm refusing to help them out. Here's what happened. So my father and I have historically had a rocky relationship. My parents divorced when I was 5 years old, and he married the woman he cheated on my mother with. I was an only child, and she had 4 kids from a previous marriage. During my childhood years, I spent most of the allocated time dedicated to my father in the divorce with my paternal grandparents, and that was every 2 weeks and 42 days in the summer. They lived in a different state, and I cherished the time I had with them, and they would always go to bat for me. There was some tension caused early in my dad's new marriage due to my stepmom demanding that my grandparents go back to the store one Christmas and get equal amounts of gifts for all of her children, even taking some from me and gifting it to her youngest. I spent many times waiting on my mom's sofa, just waiting for my dad to pick me up, and he never would. I would later find out that he was on a family vacation with his new family. I could spend all day telling Cinderella stories, but I need to keep focus on this story. My grandparents picked up his slack back. We spent summers learning how to make baskets, as well as gardening, camping, and other various different activities. Their home was like a second home to me. When I was 13 years old, I went to go live with my dad after some methodical brainwashing, and I then would rarely see my grandparents. My grandmother would call, and they would ignore it. It would hurt my heart to see it on caller ID, knowing they were just on the other line, but my dad and stepmother would not allow it. That is, unless I sat at a table with them on the call. Fast forward to the summer of my freshman year, and we went to visit my dad's side of the family. On the last night, my aunt and uncle who lived next door asked if I could stay the night with my cousins. My stepmother wanted her youngest daughter to be included, but they declined because my stepsister was a thief. A fight ensued in the front yard that night, resulting in physical altercations. My stepmother shoved my 74-year-old papa on the ground, and he had a hip replacement in the 90s and already had a stiff walk. I was utterly terrified and distraught. As the chaos ensued, I packed my belongings because they said that we were leaving. I vowed then that this would be the last straw and I would never forgive them. We missed their 50th wedding anniversary because my stepmom was still upset over what his family did to her that night. The next spring, my papa had a stroke and it was never the same. The man that helped raise me during his son's shortcomings didn't even remember my name. He then passed away in 2014. Later, I left the house when I was 18 to go to college, and that's where I met my husband. He has been my rock and helped when my dad throws fits in the last few years when he doesn't get his way. He has showed me nothing but unconditional love and support and is the father to our child mine could never muster to be. I go no contact with my dad every couple of years because of his behavior. There is an old saying that time heals all wounds, but I don't believe that to always be true. I maintained a relationship with my paternal grandmother all the way up until her passing in December. She was a cheeky one who left notes for us to find after her passing. This woman never forgot a thing when she felt slighted. They always reflected in her will. So I inherited the house that had been deed to me since 2001. My dad knew they would give it to me, but I honestly think he thought he had a chance of fighting me for it. Since 2012, he and my stepmother have been living in an RV that is now starting to fall apart. He is retired military and has no savings. Right after the funeral, he stashed his belongings in closets. I discovered this after I changed the locks and added cameras, as I live out of state and wanted security for the home before I sell my home and move into my childhood home. I put his stuff and what was owed to him in storage, and my uncle gave him the keys. After learning this, he has been furious. My step-siblings keep reaching out, telling me that I'm heartless for keeping him out of his parents' house. He called crying, and I coldly told him that if they wanted him to have it, they would have left it specifically for him. I also told him he should have treated the parents better when they were alive. I have the deed in my hands, and there is nothing left for him to do about it. The estate is almost settled, and what land he does get will also have my name on the deed. I would rather share my childhood home with my daughter and all the whimsical things it had to offer, even if my dad ends up homeless. Good for you for putting your foot down. Your dad and stepmother sound absolutely awful, and the way they treated you growing up was so unacceptable. And you know what? If I was in your shoes, I would have done the same thing. I absolutely would have denied him having that house, and I would have moved in there, since obviously you have memories there that you were never even allowed to have at your father's house. So truly, it looks like karma definitely came around because his awful actions finally are having consequences. An entitled Karen attacks me after I leave a negative review for her toy store, shoving me out the store and forcing both of us to call the police. And now I'm stuck unsure if I'm the jerk in this situation or if I should have done things differently. Here's what happened. The following story also came from the Am I the Jerk subreddit. Check the links in the description if you would like to submit your own story. So this happened about a week ago. My husband, who's a 27-year-old male, as well as myself, a 27-year-old female, recently moved across the country to this much quieter town and started looking for small businesses to go to. One day, we found what looked to be an interesting toy store. So while I watched our year-and-a-half-old son, my husband went to go check it out. When he got there, the lady running the store, who we later found out to be the owner, started acting rather odd towards my husband. She began acting suspicious of him and rather rude. All the while, he tried to just be nice, thinking the lady might cool down after a moment or two. But when she asked if he was looking for something, he said he was looking to price check and look around, maybe see if they had an item he was specifically looking for. He even mentioned a competitor in town and that he had price checked their prices earlier in the day. Somehow that seemed to set her off, and she began going on about how they send people to spy on her, take pictures of her store, items, and prices, and that they are just greedy. In the next moment, she suddenly turned on him, ranting and saying he was probably just another one of their spies, all coming in just to steal from her. At that moment, he decided to just find something small and just leave, still trying to be pleasant, but also just wanting to get out of there. She then snapped at him, yelling at him to just go and leave, to just take the item and get out of there. He was so surprised and said he wanted to pay for it. And again, she snapped and told him to go, so he did just that. Not long after, he called me telling me what happened as he drove home. I was shocked and disgusted by the lady's behavior, so I went online to Google, Yelp, and her store's Facebook page, giving each an honest review of my husband's experience at her business. Not even 30 minutes later, she commented by saying, "First of all, that is not at all what happened. I strongly urge you to discuss what really happened with your husband and enjoy the free gift I gave him. I would highly recommend rethinking your words on the reviews because this is now slander. But thanks for bashing a small business. I bet you feel like a keyboard hero now." I was surprised by this, and I will admit I got really irritated, but thought that maybe there was some kind of miscommunication or misunderstanding of some sort, specifically between her and my husband. So I said to her, "Okay, then explain to me what happened," because he definitely talked to me about what happened. And honestly, this is where things begin to really pop off. She then completely ignored what I just said, and in another comment thread of my review, posted a picture of my husband from what I am guessing in her surveillance system, and said with it, "Thank you so much for whatever you told your wife. I hope you really enjoy your free gift." And again, I got really irritated, but I also noticed something in that moment. She wasn't saying what really happened. So I responded with, "Oh, so you're avoiding my question. What is your side of the story? What happened?" Not long after that reply, my husband finally got home. I asked him for the toy, and when he asked why, I said I'm going to return it and ask her what she thinks happened, since she was giving me no straight answer online. Fast forward, and when I got to her store, I was immediately met with hostility. She asked if I was such and such online and wanted to know my name. So I said honestly, yes, that's me. She then asked for us to talk outside, and I said sure, go ahead. I did not speak to her with any form of aggression. I just wanted to return the toy and get clarification. However, I never got the chance to just talk with her, and instead, when I went to put the toy on the register, she blocked my way. She yelled at me, "I don't want you here." And immediately, without any other warning or giving me a chance to respond, she physically shoved me towards the door. In shock of the moment, and still just in the mindset of wanting to be rid of this stupid toy, I threw it off to the side and into the store, and I saw it hit the floor just before having the door shut in my face. We both called the cops, and I sat in my car waiting for them while she hid in her locked store. We both talked to them separately, and I told them how she shoved me. She told them that I hit her with a toy first. In the end, I was given an 18-month trespassing citation for her claiming that I hit her with a toy, which honestly, the citation means nothing to me, as both my husband and I have no intention of ever returning, especially after the way she treated us. However, I feel the cops did this to make her happy, as she seemed the most agitated, and just to make sure that I wouldn't come in and contact her ever again, which I agreed with and I understood. They just wanted to make sure there was no further conflict and that this didn't escalate any further. The officers did say, however, that I shouldn't have made a personal situation public. I didn't argue, but I thought this was odd. I mean, I posted in her review section our experience at her store. Isn't that what a review section is for? The next day, I noticed on both my Google review and my Facebook review that she stated, "We believe the authorities handled this situation appropriately, and it was much to our satisfaction." I ended up responding in kind by saying, "I also agree the authorities handled it well. After all, we had no intentions of returning after how we were treated. Nor do we intend to after the 18 months are up." But after thinking on it for some time, I think the both of us got worked up over a misunderstanding, even though I don't know what set you off first at my husband. Now, I'm still willing to hear your side of the story, as that was half of my intention yesterday, alongside returning your toy. If you're willing to, you can direct message me and talk. If not, I understand. And this will be the last time you will hear from my husband and myself. I will also be keeping my 1-star review up, as that is an honest experience of what happened at your store. Later on, I thought back on the events and I realized something. If I did supposedly hit her with a toy, why was no assault charge made? I feel it's because she didn't want to turn her surveillance recordings over, showing that she had laid her hands on me first. However, we do not plan to take her to court for assault either, because we feel it may be too much trouble and way too difficult to try and force her to release the footage. A few days later, we noticed her Facebook page had blocked me, and seeing through a friend's account, we saw that she had removed and hidden reviews from there. However, on all the reviews on other sites that I had put up, those negative reviews reviews were still there. And lastly, we noticed that on her Google page, she had roughly 7 negative reviews saying the same thing. So honestly, are we the jerks in this situation? What should we do? Honestly, I really wish you had your phone with you and you recorded that interaction going into that store. That's honestly the first thing I would have done. That would have cleared up all of this. Because of course, she's not going to give over her footage. She's not going to say you assaulted her, because that could very easily be proved otherwise by her footage. She literally didn't have a leg to stand on. Like seriously, this lady has some issues. She came at your husband and then you physically? Like good lord, that is not okay. So to answer your question, no, you are not the jerk here. This lady was totally out of line. Like she was not only paranoid from the get-go about your husband, but she was also hyper-aggressive, literally because you were sharing the truth online and it made her look bad. And you know that got under her skin. You know for a fact that she absolutely hated that negative review. That probably hurt her way more than anything else you could have done. And you know what? You found other reviews that corroborated your evidence. So trust me, it's not just you. This lady has a problem, and if anything, her business is probably going to shut down eventually. So nope, you are not the jerk. You didn't do anything wrong, and this lady is absolutely insane. And hopefully her business fails sooner than later. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. This next one came from the Am I the Jerk podcast subreddit. Check the links in the description if you would like to submit your own story. Am I the jerk for divorcing my cheating wife after she cheated on me with a coworker? Here's what happened. Now, before we go any further, all names in this story are completely fake. Well, the title says it all. The moment I discovered my wife Sarah's infidelity is forever etched in my memory. It was a typical evening, and I had returned home from work due to feeling unwell. As I walked into our house, a sense of unease washed over me, prompting me to investigate what had been bothering me for weeks. My suspicion had been growing steadily, fueled by subtle changes in Sarah's behavior and the distant look in her eyes. Deep down, I knew something was amiss, but I wanted to trust her completely. However, on that fateful evening, my intuition got the better of me. I made my way to our study, where Sarah often spent time on her computer. As I approached, I noticed her quickly minimize a chat window on the screen. Alarm bells rang in my head as I realized that she was trying to hide something from me. The sense of betrayal intensified, and I mustered the courage to confront her about it. With trembling hands, I asked Sarah to show me what she had been hiding. At first, she hesitated and tried to deflect, but the desperation in my voice and the tears welling up in my eyes left her with no choice but to reveal the truth. She confessed to having an affair with her coworker Steve for several months. The words hung heavily in the air, piercing through my heart like a dagger. The pain was excruciating, as if my entire world had crumbled in an instant. My mind raced with a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, sadness, and disbelief all vied for dominance. In that moment, the trust we had built over a decade of marriage shattered irreparably. The foundation upon which our relationship stood had crumbled, leaving behind nothing but a hollow shell of what once was. I knew then that I couldn't continue the marriage, not after such a profound betrayal. As the days passed, I sought solace and clarity by staying with my parents. The pain was unbearable, but it allowed me to reflect on the situation and consider my options. The more I pondered, the more convinced I became that divorce was the only path forward. The breach of trust was too deep, and I couldn't envision a future where I couldn't fully trust Sarah again. With a heavy heart, I made the agonizing decision to file for divorce. Sarah pleaded with me for another chance, promising change and expressing remorse for her actions, but deep down, I knew that rebuilding the trust that we once had was an impossible task. Throughout the divorce proceedings, Sarah's pleas continued, but my resolve remained unyielding. I wanted to break free from the pain and betrayal that had consumed our relationship. It was a painful and emotional journey, but I knew it was the right choice for my own well-being. Months later, the divorce was finalized. Sarah was left devastated, and I felt a mix of relief and sorrow. The weight of the past slowly lifted from my shoulders, allowing me to begin the process of healing and moving forward. In the midst of rebuilding my life, I cautiously opened myself up to the possibility of love once again. And it was during this time that I met Jenny, a remarkable woman who embodied the qualities I had longed for in a partner. Her kindness and honesty and unwavering loyalty helped restore my faith in love. Jenny became my rock, supporting me through the healing process and showing me that love could be pure and genuine. With her by my side, I rediscovered happiness and fulfillment. We forged a deep connection, and a year later, we celebrated our marriage, grateful for the love and joy that we found in each other. As for Sarah, her whereabouts and actions became inconsequential to me. While rumors reached me that she had moved away, I made a conscious choice not to keep tabs on her. My focus shifted towards my own happiness, the well-being of my new family, and the pursuit of a life that is fulfilling. Reflecting on the situation, seeking revenge was initially a part of my emotional response. However, I came to realize that revenge would not bring me true happiness or closure. Divorcing Sarah, on the other hand, allowed me to break free from the pain and betrayal, paving the way for a brighter future. Today, I am finally content with my life. Jenny's love and the family we've created bring me immeasurable joy. I am grateful for the strength I found within myself and for the blessings that have come my way. While the past held moments of intense pain, it has shaped me into a resilient individual who values trust, loyalty, and personal happiness above all else. Wow, this story had a great ending at the end of the day. Obviously, you're not the jerk for divorcing your wife for cheating on you. If I was in your shoes and I experienced something like that, I think I would also be devastated and really want to get away from her. I mean, you saw right away that this is just not going to work. There's no way you can even begin to try and repair this, and it was better to get out of that relationship while you could and move on to somebody who really would love you. Because what Sarah did to you was unacceptable. She cheated on you behind your back with a coworker, and now she's probably wondering, well, was it worth it? And I can guarantee you that the answer is a resounding no. So good for you for moving on and finding a better life, because Sarah betrayed your trust, and from the sounds of it, it looks like your new wife is going to treat you a lot better than Sarah ever could. My boyfriend is giving me the silent treatment all because he's embarrassed of his actions. And honestly, at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. My boyfriend and I have been together for 2 years, and we just moved in together a few months ago. I'll preface this by saying that we went to a football game earlier, and he had quite a bit to drink. He stopped when we got home so he could sober up. That way we could go see his friends tonight. But he still seemed a bit tipsy when this whole thing went down. About an hour ago, we were getting ready to go see his friends. He was in the bathroom, and all of a sudden, I hear him freak out. Apparently, our dog had gone pee on the floor in the bathroom. About a half hour prior to this, she had been staring at us in a needy sort of way, which she does literally 24/7, making it hard to decipher what she needs, if anything. So I thought that maybe she needed to go potty, but he didn't think so because she had just gotten back from the dog park about an hour before this. He started yelling at her in a lighthearted way, but I told him to stop because she was trying to tell us she needed to go to the bathroom, and neither of us took her out. It was our fault that she had an accident. She's the sweetest, most well-behaved dog. I said that she can't tell whether or not he's playfully yelling at her. All she hears is him raising his voice at her, which clearly scared her because she ran out of the bathroom with her tail tucked between her legs, and she was shaking at that. He stopped yelling at her, went downstairs to grab our food delivery. Then when he came back upstairs, he came over to where me and the dog were. I was sitting at the dining room table, and she was sitting underneath me. He again playfully raised his hand like he was about to hit her, and she was cowering underneath me. I became livid. I yelled at him, "What are you doing?" He laughed and said he was just kidding, as if our dog was supposed to know he wasn't actually going to hit her. He has a dark sense of humor, especially when he drinks, but this was absolutely unacceptable. It left a horrible taste in my mouth. After this, we didn't say anything to each other. I ate my dinner at the kitchen counter while he ate behind me at the dining table. He was eating spaghetti and was very loudly slurping his noodles. He's eaten spaghetti in front of me many times, and he's never done that, so I figured that he was just trying to further irritate me. At first, I let it slide, but after the 5th time, I peered back at him and I said, "Do you seriously have the audacity to slurp your noodles?" He sarcastically looks at me and says, "Wow, sorry." I continued eating, and a couple minutes later, he started loudly belching, all while I was still clearly eating. I looked at him again, and he was like, "Geez, sorry, I can't do anything right." Look, I'm not offended by burping normally, but slurping your food and burping while someone is eating in front of you is so grating and entirely bad-mannered to me. Then he passive-aggressively started talking to our dog, saying something like, "Should we just stay home tonight?" And then went and changed into his pajamas and proceeded to not talk to me after that. After we finished eating, he stomped off to the bedroom and slammed the door. I immediately followed him in and asked what his problem was. He didn't respond for a while, and then he said, "I don't like the way you talk to me. You seem annoyed." I said I was annoyed at the time, but I wanted to move on so we don't ruin our weekend yet again. This is the 3rd time he's chosen to silently pout and stomp around like a child, mind you. You know, rather than communicate, and this is what he does in an argument ever since we moved in together. I am beyond fed up with it. The last time was 3 or 4 weeks ago, and the silent treatment lasted for 4 full days. I just stood in the doorway waiting for a response, and he kept ignoring me and watching TV. Occasionally, he would shoot me a dirty look and snap snap and say, "What do you want me to say?" I said, if this relationship is going to continue, we need to start communicating about issues as soon as they arise, not ignore each other for days on end. He said, "I'm embarrassed and I don't want to talk to you," and then motioned for me to get out. So I shut the door, and I've been sitting in the living room ever since then. He's come out 3 times to get something from the kitchen and just keeps shooting me dirty looks and not talking to me. As I said, this is a routine thing that happens during arguments, and I'm beyond fed up. I feel like I'm dating a child, not a grown man who's turning 30 next month. What should I do or say to him? I'm so annoyed that this is happening again, especially when I'm about to leave and spend the night at my parents'. I don't even know if this relationship is worth salvaging. What should I do? Honestly, your boyfriend is being incredibly immature. Giving someone the silent treatment and refusing to talk to them all because of something that you did and the stupid stuff you decided to pull off is honestly so toxic. There's no reason to act like that. Like, seriously, that's inappropriate. You literally just said, "Hey, stop burping and belching and don't pretend like you're gonna hit the dog." And by the way, what he did to that dog was awful. The original poster's right. I don't think that dogs can really understand the nuance of any kind of sarcasm or stuff like that. So if you raise your voice at them, they probably think, "Oh yeah, you really are mad at me." Or if you fuss at them or make them feel bad, they're gonna feel that and they're gonna think you're upset. So I don't blame the original poster for being like, "Stop it, what are you doing?" Let's also remember that this guy's almost 30 years old, and his way of dealing with problems is to give the silent treatment. That is so immature, it's not even funny. So honestly, if you want any kind of positive change, it's definitely gonna have to start with him. He needs to learn how to communicate better, or at least just own up to his mistakes, because the way he's doing it right now is honestly so toxic, and you do not deserve that in the slightest. Am I the jerk for fainting at my aunt's wedding and practically ruining it all in one go? Here's what happened. So I'm a 21-year-old female, and I attended my aunt's wedding a few weeks ago. I was not part of the wedding. I was just a guest, which I was fine with. Before the wedding, everyone was advised to drink lots of water and eat something beforehand because it was going to be extremely hot that day. The wedding started at 5:00 p.m., and I had absolutely nothing to eat or drink up until then, except maybe a granola bar because I was extremely busy that day. So when it was time for the wedding, I was already tired and hungry. About 30 minutes into the wedding, which was a church too, by the way, I was feeling uneasy and lightheaded, so I excused myself to go to the washroom. As I was walking, I got the feeling like I was about to collapse. The next thing I can remember was coming to and seeing lots of people surrounding me, including the bride and groom. Apparently, when I fainted, I fell onto the photographer who was crouched down near me. Not only that, but he dropped the camera lens and broke it. To be honest, I don't even remember seeing the photographer, but I may have been too dizzy or something like that to even see him in the first place. Now, the wedding was a bit of a cheaper one, so the photographer was a family friend of the groom's who only had one camera with him. The bride was just in tears that she won't have any good pictures from her wedding. The photographer insisted that he could drive home and grab a different one, but it would unfortunately take too long to do that. The bride was indeed mad at me, but I feel like it was a bit harsh as it was extremely embarrassing for me already. Fainting never even crossed my mind as something that would happen at all. Now, they did get pictures, but unfortunately it was on their cell phones. So am I the jerk for fainting at this wedding and practically ruining it? What should I do? So honestly, I can kind of see both sides of this. Obviously, you didn't mean to faint. I mean, that wasn't really in your control. I mean, nobody shows up to a wedding and is like, "Hey, I'm definitely gonna faint right about now." But you yourself did say that, "Hey, I didn't eat or drink all day," even though you knew it was gonna be hot. That part is absolutely on you. Nobody could have predicted that you were gonna pass out. Nobody could have planned for that, and honestly, it really was kind of a freak accident. But I think this could have been avoided if you just drank some water and ate some food. You should not have ignored that advice. Like, clearly the worst thing happened to you specifically. You fainted at the wedding, and now they're never gonna have really good pictures of their wedding. And that's not fair. That literally is not fair in the slightest. Now, don't get me wrong, you didn't do this intentionally, and of course that photographer is really cheap for only bringing one lens with them. But overall, you probably should have planned this better, and you should have been more attentive to the advice that you were given. My former employer was refusing to pay me my money that he owed me, claiming that he was going through financial hardship and that because he was closing down his business, he was not going to pay me a single dime. So I decided to get some revenge, and as a result of me being involved, he ended up getting exposed for cheating on his wife, resulting in his life practically being ruined. Here's what happened. So honestly, I want to start off by saying I was just trying to get my money that I was owed. I wasn't trying to ruin this guy's life in the process. That's honestly just what ended up happening. And I was told by some of my friends that I might want to upload this story here. So here we go. Some years back, I ended up doing work for this guy guy, I'll call him Richard, that's not his real name, and it was just a side job for some extra money, not my career or anything like that. Richard had a small business. It's really boring. I won't really get into any of that, but before me, he had one other employee, so I made 2 in total. Literally, just 2 employees. That's how small this business was. The thing was, Richard ran his business like garbage. I didn't know the specifics of his financial situation, but based on where he lived, the car that he drove, as well as every other aspect of his life, he was doing pretty well. Maybe it was an inheritance or something like that, but whatever, I didn't know. But his situation in life clearly wasn't due to the business. And again, to reiterate, he ran this business horribly. In fact, he ran this business so badly that after 6 months after I started doing work for him, the business wasn't making any money anymore. So instead of regular payments like usual, the other employee and I had to start asking where our money was before it showed up. Then the payments started getting more and more behind. Eventually, I was owed around $500. Then one day, the other employee tells me, I'm done. He owes me like $5,000 and I'm not going to keep working for nothing. And when I heard that, I was in shock because I had no idea he was owed that much. The trouble with pay clearly went back further than I knew. So Richard ended up coming to me and saying, look, I owe the other guy money and I need to pay him. Do you mind if I get him all paid up? Which means I would have to hold off on paying you for a month or 2. But once he's paid off, I swear I'll make it all up to you. Now, because I'm a complete idiot and because I felt bad about the first employee, who was a good guy overall, I said fine, go right ahead. And honestly, this was such a big mistake as things escalated in a way that I really didn't expect. So I didn't get paid at all for a while, which increased my total up to about $1,500. Then I eventually heard from the other employee and he told me that Richard finally paid him everything he was owed. So I thought to myself, great, now it's my turn, right? Well, I was completely wrong. A few weeks after I heard the other employee was paid up, which I only ever heard from him, never Richard himself, Richard told me he was closing the business, which didn't shock me at all. I mean, surely it had been losing money for quite a while. So I say to him, okay, so where's my money? And I told him exactly how much he owed me. I got back a response that basically said, well, the thing is, I can't really pay you now. And then he started giving me excuses. And this went on for a year. Now, I looked into what my steps were legally, but I would have had to file something in small claims court, as it is only $1,500, and having to get a lawyer would probably eat up most of it. So I just kept bugging Richard about the money. I was saying, hey, just pay me $25 a month. I don't care. But he wouldn't even do that. He told me about how he's got to go through all this stuff to dissolve the business and everything, and how he'll pay me as soon as he can. And overall, he just avoided taking responsibility. At one point, he said something about how people were currently suing him, which honestly is not a big shock, if I wanted to, just so my debt could be added in or something like that. I said, fine, give me their names and numbers. But guess what? He never even did that. Eventually, I realized that nothing was ever going to come of this, and I was just going to be out the money I was owed. But while I'd be doing the work for him, I had emailed back and forth with his wife maybe a dozen times. To this day, I've never met his wife. I've never spoken with her, just communicated through email and text messaging. But she seemed really nice, and she had told me something like, well, Richard won't tell you this, but he doesn't really know what he's going to do with the business, and I know you've been a big help. So I just got the idea that, you know what? This next email I send to Richard about trying to get my money, I'm going to include his wife in on it too, just so she knows how much he sucks. I heard back from her almost right away, and she was like, I'm so sorry about this. Please keep me posted on what happens. Then suddenly, just like magic, Richard started talking about making a payment schedule. He started sending me $100 every month, and the debt got down to about $1,000. I figured that his wife must have gotten on his case about it, and I laughed to myself about how whipped old Richard really was. But then the money suddenly stopped again. The excuses started coming in, and one day, he told me he was just going through a hard time financially right now, which I knew was utter garbage. He still had the nice car, the nice house, etc., but it's not like I had a printout of his bank records that I could easily use to try and call him out on this. On that exact day that he told me this though, I was watching the local pro team's baseball game later that night, and who did I see but Richard himself? And he was in great seats no less, second row right in front, just off to the right. Every time they zoomed in on a right-handed batter, you could clearly see him. And this was in September, in the midst of a playoff race, so those tickets were not cheap. It's no Perry Mason moment, but the thought of replying to his "I'm having financial trouble" email with a picture of him in those seats and me being like, yeah, I can see that, gave me the best justice idea ever. So I was looking for a good image of him to use, but every time I paused the video, his face got somewhat out of focus. It was clearly him if you watch the video, but I needed a still image that was also clearly him. Then, in the 7th inning, a foul ball got caught about 2 rows behind him, and they zoomed in on that area of the crowd. And there was Richard, clear as day, sitting with his wife of all people. I'm thinking to myself, oh, I got you now. The next morning, I replied to his previous message by sending the screen capture to him. I figured even if I didn't get my money, at least I had that one sweet moment of satisfaction of busting him there. Then, almost at the last second, I decided to send it to his wife too, just so she would know what was going on and how the money had stopped again. And remember how quickly Richard's tune had changed that first time I included her? I even thought that maybe her being in the picture would make her light a fire underneath his butt this time. So I sent it, but I didn't hear anything back from either of them. 2-3 days go by and still nothing. Then I heard from the other employee that I'd worked with. He says, "Hey, did you hear about Richard?" I said to them, "No, what happened?" They say to me, "His wife kicked him out and filed for divorce." I'm saying to myself, there's no way. They say to him, "Yeah, apparently she caught him cheating on her." I responded to my friend by saying the following, I wonder how. Okay, you know what would be crazy? What if that wasn't his wife in that picture? And I sent her that picture and no way. He was probably talking about divorce when he mentioned having financial trouble. I mean, that would make sense. The divorce was already in the works before the picture. There's literally no chance whatsoever that I inadvertently told his wife that he was cheating on her, right? I mean, come on, there's no way that happened. But guess what? That is exactly what happened. The woman at the game was not his wife. Apparently, his wife knew the woman though, and knew that Richard had lied about where he was that night and who he was with. And an absolute storm of garbage of epic proportions quickly followed after that. I ended up emailing her not long after and being like, hello? I've been hearing some things and I can't help but think that picture I sent might have been a part of this. And she said that she'd been meaning to contact me and she actually thanked me. She said she wanted out of the marriage anyways, and she said she might need me as a witness. But I didn't know what for. I mean, are divorces like a trial or something like that? But anyways, she paid me the $1,000 he owed me, plus another $500 on top of that. I don't know if she thought he still owed me $1,500, or if she did that on purpose to try and give me some extra. And thankfully, I didn't have to be a witness for anything, which honestly was good. Also, you remember how Richard has a nice car and a nice house and all that? Well, his wife was the one with the money, meaning that he no longer has it. They got divorced and he moved away, and I have no idea what became of him. Honestly, considering everything that happened, I feel kinda bad for him. But then I remember there's no reason he couldn't have just paid me. Seriously, why not just pay me? He had the money, but I honestly chalk it up to Richard having a lot of negative karma coming his way, and I just so happened to play a part in catching him in it. Wow, that's honestly insane. You were just trying to get your money. You literally were not trying to break up this marriage. So when you saw him at the game and you sent that picture, you were literally just trying to get back at this guy. And honestly, I don't blame you. He owed you over $1,000. I don't know about you, but working for free and not having your paycheck come in really does suck. It basically makes what you're doing a complete waste of time. So good for you for standing up for yourself and in a way basically tearing this guy down. This guy absolutely had it coming. He was clearly never gonna pay you, and you are 100% right. His bad karma was coming his way one way or another, but it's really cool to see that you were the one to help tip the scales. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. I served my husband divorce papers after he posted a reel on Instagram making fun of my weight. And now I'm not sure if I went too far or if I overreacted. And at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. So for a bit of context, it's been over a month since this happened. I'm a 32-year-old female and my husband is 30 years old, and we've been married for 3 years now, together for 5. Our marriage isn't perfect, but we make it work. We both were fairly in shape when we first got together, but I gained a lot of weight when we had our kid and haven't since then. We are also all Indians, and it's somewhat acceptable to pull each other's legs. Mostly family does it, and there isn't really any malicious intent. So my husband routinely teases me about my weight gain, but I know that he loves me, and I try not to take it personally. Because even I tease him about how long he takes in the shower, and how obsessed he is with styling himself in front of the mirror. Innocent stuff like that. Well, my husband has quite the following on Instagram, and usually posts a lot of reels, and it's usually harmless and it's just fun stuff. I was scrolling through Instagram, and I saw a reel about me, how much he loves me and all that, and I thought that it was sweet. But immediately after that, I saw another one, and this one was also about me. It was a 5 years ago versus now picture of the both of us, with a background background voiceover. It said the following: before wedding, my responsibility was 55 kilos. Now it is 75 kilos and it keeps on increasing. This was then followed up by a cackling sound. Now, I don't know what happened, but when I saw this, a switch flipped inside of me. I felt humiliated and ashamed of myself in a way I had never felt before. I felt anger and hurt at my husband for something that was normal ribbing for the both of us. My husband was away on a work trip, so I didn't contact him. I went through some other online forums to try and find advice on similar situations, and most people advise serving divorce papers, and it made me wonder, should I do something like that? Well, cut to the present, and yes, I left divorce papers on his nightstand and went to my friend's house, and that was 2 days ago. The entire family, including him and my parents, have been hurling insults at me for bringing shame to their family. They told me there's no concept of divorce in our culture, and I should just keep my mouth shut of all this feminist garbage, as they put it, and come home to tend to my family, because as a wife and a mother, that's what I'm supposed to do. They also said that nobody will marry me because I am trying to be a divorcee, and this is true in my culture. My husband said that he didn't think I'd snap at him like that, and thought that this warrants a conversation if it really did hurt so badly. I think I may have gone too far, and I may be at risk of being disowned by my family. Should I just accept this compromise? Was I being too dramatic? What should I do? Honestly, from the way you've made this sound, it really does seem like we went from being insulted on the internet all the way to saying, hey, let's get a divorce. Like, I don't know about you, but this seems like such an extreme step. Sure, what he did was incredibly rude. This was seriously hurtful and it really hurt your feelings. He made fun of your weight online and he shared it with everybody that he knows. That's not fair, you didn't consent to that, and I don't blame you for being upset. But instead of talking to him ahead of time and being like, hey, I want you to take that down, that really hurt my feelings and I don't like that, or some kind of conversation like that, you instead took the advice of the internet and said, okay, divorce is the next step. Not counseling, not talking through it, not having some kind of intervention, not even expressing your feelings about how that made you feel. Nothing like that. Nope, it's time to get a divorce. In my opinion, I think this is going way too fast. Yes, he does need to apologize. And yes, it seems like some boundaries need to be made between the two of you. You really can say, hey, I don't want to be made fun of anymore and I want this to stop. Stop making fun of my weight and all that stuff. And have some kind of conversation and try and work on everything between the two of you instead of dropping everything in front of you and saying, yep, I'm getting divorced. I don't know, maybe there's other things going on that the original poster is not sharing in this regard, but it really seems from my perspective that this is going way too fast. And sure, I completely recognize that maybe there's some cultural differences here that I'm not getting. Like, clearly there is something I might be missing in this regard, so if you do know more about this culture and you have better insight on what's actually happening here, I would love to hear what you have to say. Please leave a comment down below, because if there is some kind of clarification here, I would love to hear about it. So hopefully something can change here, because yes, he did hurt your feelings, but in my opinion, I don't think you should suddenly jump to divorce just because he did something that embarrassed you online. This next one came from the Am I the Jerk subreddit. Check the links in the description if you would like to submit your own stories. Am I the jerk for not wanting to pay my sister's mortgage despite the fact that we do have the money after I won the lottery? Here's what happened. So to start things out, I did not pay for my sister's mortgage despite paying my parents' mortgage off and financially helping my friend. For some context, I make a lot more money than my sister, and I already pay for her kids' schooling, extracurriculars, and have a college fund for each of them. I also won the lottery recently. My husband and I keep our money private, including the lottery. After my parents' house got destroyed by a hurricane, I paid for a new one for them because they didn't have the funds. Also, my friend got money stolen from her, but she had no evidence. I helped her get back on her feet and paid for her rent for nearly 2 years. Now, my sister and I have never been friends, as I have always been more nerdy and into school, while she was more into athletics and in the arts. She would always bully me as I was the favorite child. Once, she even left me at a park overnight because, according to her, she didn't love me and she hoped I would get taken away. It was a miracle that I didn't. Of course, my parents dealt with her harshly, which made her hate me even more. One night, my husband and I were out with friends drinking, and I got drunk and accidentally said something about our money, and my friend told my entire family. My parents said nothing, but my sister started going out of her way to do nice things. I paid for a vacation for my parents, my husband's parents, myself, my husband, and our kids, while also including my sister and her husband, as well as her husband's parents. It was short, but it was a nice get-together. So I really do nice things for my family overall. One day, my sister calls me asking if I could pay off her mortgage and pay for a vacation for her and her family to 4 different places over the summer her, totaling to around $100,000 or more. But I told her that I couldn't do it as it was a lot of money. She then screamed at me saying she knows I have the funds. Now, although I do, I am saving my money for retirement and emergencies that might come up, and I don't want to spend it recklessly. I am already paying for all of her kids' schooling. She tells me she has always loved me and been so kind, but I reminded her of several events in our childhood which she absolutely denies, such as leaving me at the park overnight and hoping I get taken away, or breaking my arm on purpose, or using her height and athletic ability just to hurt me. She has complained to my parents, and a lot of extended family members are taking her side. Now, my extended family knows I have money and have started being really kind and sometimes asking me for things, and it honestly feels like everybody is now a vulture except for my parents, thank God. Some of my relatives won't even talk to me now that I've refused money, but they all start it in the same way. They say stuff like, "How's your family? How are you? How's the kids? How's your husband in life? Are you doing all right?" And then after about a 3-minute conversation, they start asking for money. One specific case on my husband's side was so bad. He has an uncle who came to me begging for money, claiming that he was out of it. I told him I couldn't give him anything, as it was in trust and retirement funds that I couldn't access. I got to the point where he broke all of my plates from my deceased grandmother, and I was very angry, but I tried to stay calm and collected. Eventually, though, he did storm out. My husband then told me that he did have money. In fact, he had a little over $200,000 left for his retirement. He broke my plates from my grandmother, who I was incredibly close with, and he did it all for nothing. And I honestly was crying for half the night about that. Now, remember, once the cat is out of the bag, I'll never get it back in. I really hope somebody else gets a ton of money so I won't be badgered anymore. Now, so far, I haven't paid for anything besides that vacation, as well as my parents' mortgage and financially helping out my friend and for my sister's children. But I am not paying for anything else, especially not my sister. Maybe I should even stop paying for her children's schooling and activities and take out the college funds for her children and just save that money for me and my children. So am I the jerk in this situation? What should I do? First and foremost, I don't think you're the jerk in this situation. Your immediate family and your extended family, minus your parents, who are thankfully cool about this, they are all acting like complete morons. They are only coming out of the woodwork so they can try and squeeze some money out of you and your husband. And that's not fair in the slightest, because you have it right. Once the cat is out of the bag for this type of stuff, it's never going back in. People will always be coming after you. And unfortunately, I think that's going to be the case for a long time. And it really sucks that you had a moment of weakness and you were drunk and you talked about all the money that you had, because that honestly was the biggest mistake you could have made. Because that kind of rumor is going to spread like wildfire. You will never be able to put that toothpaste back in the tube. Now, when it comes to paying for your sister's mortgage and her children's stuff, I think personally, if I was in your shoes, I would personally keep the commitments that I had already agreed to, just to avoid any potential legal drama that might happen. I mean, it sounds like you're kind of loaded. It sounds like you have a lot of money at your disposal, and the last thing you need is some kind of lawsuit, all because you pull out the college fund or something like that. Remember, people can sue you for whatever they want, even if it's some kind of illegitimate reason. But I think with that in mind, I would personally refuse to pay for anything else moving forward. I think the excuse you use with your uncle, whether it was legitimate or not, of saying that all the money is in retirement funds or in trust funds, might be a good way to stay out of this conversation and protect your financial assets. Because remember, this is your money after all. You have it, it's yours, it's under your name, and you really are not obligated to have to pay for anything. So no, I don't think you're the jerk. Just because you have a lot of money doesn't mean you have to fork it over at the drop of a hat. That, in my opinion, is really weird and honestly really ridiculous, and hopefully for the sake of you and your kids, things get a lot better relatively soon. Am I the jerk for telling my son's pregnant girlfriend that if she keeps disrespecting me, then she will not be living in my house? Here's what happened. So I have a son who got his high school girlfriend pregnant. It was obviously an unplanned pregnancy, and it resulted in my son's girlfriend getting kicked out of her house by her mom. Now, I never liked this girl, but I obviously couldn't let her stay on the streets now that she's carrying my grandchild. So I let her live in our house. Now, both she and my son gave up on college for the near future, and my son is now working a full-time job so he can provide for them in the future. The problem is that his girlfriend refuses to do anything, but will absolutely all day just lock herself in my son's room, eating snacks and watching videos on my son's computer. I need to drag her out to just help me with cooking and to clean up at least the room she's staying in. But she's always complaining about how I'm working her like a dog, even though she's already in constant pain because of her pregnancy. And then she'll come crying to my son about my treatment of her. Mind you, she doesn't have a high-risk pregnancy. And I know this because my husband and I are the ones fully paying for her medical controls. And I don't put her up to doing tasks like cleaning the toilet or anything similar. But she really did cross the line. After I got dressed up, she asked me where I was going. And when I told her that I'm getting ready for church, her exact response was to say, "I didn't know that there were churches that allowed people in that looked like a lady of the night." At that point, I absolutely had it with her. And I told her straight up that I don't care who she is. I won't allow her to disrespect me while living in my house. And if she can't keep her attitude in check, then she can get out of my house. She pretty much started crying at that point and immediately called my son, who later on also gave me an attitude for treating his girlfriend like garbage when apparently I don't know what she's going through. My husband also thinks that while she was definitely out of line with that, she was probably only acting out because of pregnancy hormones, and that I could have handled the situation better without straight up threatening to leave her homeless. So am I the jerk in this situation? What should I do? I don't think you're the jerk at all. She needs to start being more agreeable around the house. She can't just stay in that room all day and do nothing. That is seriously not okay. She has to earn her keep just like everybody else, and she has to be respectful of the house she's staying in. So her talking to you like that is completely inappropriate. And look, I get the situation. You not only don't like her, but you never expected her living with you after your son got her pregnant. The situation sucks, and I'm really sorry you're going through it. But if she wants to expect to have any kind of home in your house, then in my opinion, she needs to start learning respect and earning her keep around the house. Otherwise, in my opinion, there's definitely going to be problems. An entitled preacher and his assistant go to my grandmother's deathbed demanding that she write them and the church into her will. But after being deeply hurt and highly offended by their hypocrisy, my grandmother, even beyond the grave, decided to get some revenge by exposing them for the awful people that they really were, as well as humiliating them in front of the entire community. And I've never been happier to witness this all firsthand in my life. Here's what happened. So my grandmother was a member of a large conservative Bible-believing church for her entire adult life. This church, which I'll call Big White Church, was a member of a large evangelical denomination. Big White Church was located in a prosperous suburb of a large city in the Bible Belt of the deep south of the US. Now, Grandma was very active in Big White Church. She worked in the nursery every Sunday morning, helped cook hundreds of church fellowship breakfasts and dinners, accompanied her children and grandchildren on dozens of church retreats and choir tours, taught youth Bible study on Sunday nights, and was very active in supporting home missions, as well as helping with our youth programs. She always paid her tithing and often gave extra for missions and special offerings. Grandma's greatest talent was making other people feel important. I've seen this firsthand many times. Although I belong to a different church, I often visited with Grandma, and when I did, I usually went to Big White Church functions with her. I've seen her single-handedly cook breakfast for dozens of Big White Church youth members, which is a task that took over 2 hours, even in the church's large kitchen. Then, after the meal, she asked the group for a round of applause for the high school student leader for doing such a great job of organizing the prayer breakfast. I remember that on a church youth retreat at a rural church camp, she drove most of the night to go back to the city and retrieve a big box of evangelical materials that one of the assistant pastors had forgotten and asked her to go get. And this was all in time for our morning program the next day. His senior, the senior pastor, never found out that the assistant pastor had messed up or that my grandma had fixed it for him. And the assistant pastor never even thanked my grandma. Even though I was a child, this bothered me so much that I ended up asking her about it, but she said that she didn't mind at all. She told me that her reward would be that those materials would help children find Jesus. So overall, my grandma was just a good person. But unfortunately, the church would try to take advantage of my grandma in the worst way I could even imagine. Now, my grandma's service to her church ended abruptly at the age of 73, and that's when she broke her back in a car accident. Afterwards, for the last 10 years of her life, she was homebound and could not go to church because of this injury and declining health due to old age. Her mind was just as sharp as ever, and her faith remained sincere, but her body wore out a little more every day. During those 10 years, she made many efforts to reach out to the church, its leadership, and her church friends, inviting them to visit her at her home, etc. But it was all absolutely without success. Every one of those invitations was declined or simply ignored. Near the end, when she was in home hospice care, she decided to plan her own funeral. She and my grandpa called her church and asked for the senior pastor, whom she had known for over 30 years, to visit her so that they could plan the memorial service, which she and grandpa wanted to be held held at the church. Now, the pastor was too busy, but the assistant pastor stopped by a few days later. According to my grandpa, here's what happened at that meeting with my grandma literally on her deathbed. My grandma, grandpa, and the assistant pastor discussed her funeral for a couple of minutes. Then the assistant pastor started pressuring her. He said to her, "You need to lay up your treasure in heaven by remembering your church in your will." But my grandpa interrupted him and firmly told him that this is neither the time nor the place to discuss her will. They went back to discussing the funeral for a few minutes. Then the assistant pastor steered the conversation back to my grandma's will, with liberal injections of how badly her church needed her support. Grandpa told him several times that it was inappropriate to talk to grandma about her will or the church's financial needs because she was terminally ill and in an enormous amount of pain physically. The assistant pastor would agree and briefly talk about the funeral, but would then go back to talking about the church's financial needs, as well as heavenly rewards, while also quoting scripture. It was at this point that my grandma started to cry. To put this into context, my grandma was more than a steel magnolia. She was titanium coated with diamond wrapped in Kevlar. She rarely ever cried, and never ever cried about herself. Not one tear when the doctor told her that her back was broken so badly that she would never walk again, nor during the following 6 months in futile rehab. She would shed sincere but well-managed tears at funerals and while visiting family members in the hospital when they received bad news. She would cry to console others, and she would weep with those who weep. But nobody, not grandpa, not her daughter, nor any of my uncles or grandma's siblings, ever remembered her crying for herself. My grandma was sobbing uncontrollably. My grandfather, who's a retired steelworker, a former Marine sergeant, and a Korean War combat veteran, physically grabbed the pastor and escorted him out of their house. Contrary to everyone's expectations, Grandma lived for another 6 months, mostly because of sheer force of will. Eventually, though, Grandma passed away, and we held her memorial service at the funeral home, not the big white church. The senior pastor and the assistant pastor were conspicuously absent. In fact, there were no professional Christians from the big white church. They were not at the service at all, not even in the audience. To start the service, Grandpa stood at the podium in front of the crowd and said the following. Some of you may have heard that I disinvited the senior pastor and the assistant pastor from this funeral service. This service is not an appropriate place for me to give you my reasons for doing so, although you all know me, and so you know that my reasons are good ones. Also, my wife asked me to exclude them. This funeral service may be different from other funerals that you have attended. It is going to be an open microphone funeral. Everyone who wants to say something is invited to come up here and describe your friendship with my wife. Tell a story about her that is worth remembering, or anything else you want to say that will honor her memory and bring comfort to everyone here today. I have asked several family members to prepare statements, but you don't have to have anything prepared. Please, if you want to say something, come up here and do so. There were about 100 people at the funeral service. At least a third of them eventually stepped up to the microphone. The service, which had planned to last about 30 minutes, lasted over 2 hours, and as best as I can tell, not one person left early. There was laughing, crying, and hugging. 3 of my grandchildren played some of her favorite songs on the piano and guitar. We all joined hands and sang her favorite hymns. Afterwards, dozens of people told my grandfather that it was one of the most comforting and uplifting funerals they had ever attended. More than a few had remarked that funerals are better without preachers anyways, or something like that. Fast forward, and a couple of weeks later, it was time to start distributing what was in my grandma's will. Although Grandma and Grandpa dearly loved each other, they had separate wills because, as she told my mom, that makes it easier for us to respect each other's turf, and because their lawyer had recommended it. Nobody thought that my grandparents were wealthy. They had lived in the same small but charming house in a prosperous, well-maintained suburban neighborhood for the past 50 years, and had worked hard and lived modestly, but it was rumored that they had a very nice nest egg. Of course, there is no legal requirements for anyone to attend the reading of the will, or to even have a reading. Modern telecommunications and near universal literacy have made this quaint custom practically extinct, but the reading of the will was a tradition in our family because it was one of those events that gave our close-knit extended family an excuse to get together. We never had family reunions. They were too difficult to schedule for our large family, but we got together at birthdays, holidays, funerals, baptisms, you name it. So if you attended several of these, you would see just about every one of your cousins, aunts, uncles, and even great aunts and uncles who were grandma's and grandpa's siblings and in-laws. With this family tradition in mind, many of our family members' wills often contained very personal items that had very little cash value, but were the departed family members' way of telling their loved ones that they wanted to share a cherished memory with them one last time. As an added incentive to attend, the family rumor mill had been buzzing with speculation, encouraged by my grandfather, that my grandmother's will contain some surprises. The reading was held in a conference room at a lawyer's office. Unsurprisingly, the attendees included my mom, as well as aunts, uncles, great-aunts, great-uncles, and many of the grandchildren. We were all surprised, however, to see the senior and assistant pastor from Big White Church. They informed us that Grandma's lawyer had told them that Grandma's will had something not only for the Big White Church, but also for them personally. Now, maybe this was just our imagination, but my siblings, my cousins, and myself couldn't help notice that these preachers appeared to be actively salivating over their good fortune at my grandma's generosity. Grandma had a large family, so a sizable number of beneficiaries were named in her will. The lawyer's conference room was a bit smaller than an average middle-class living room. Extra chairs had been brought in, every seat was filled, and people were standing in every remaining space. There was barely space for all of us. Grandma's lawyer suggested that the senior pastor and the assistant pastor sit in chairs which were in the front of the room, next to himself. Since there was a large table in the room, this meant that the lawyer and these two preachers were the only ones who were directly facing everyone else. Although the preachers were gratified to be physically next to the center of attention, they did not notice, as all of the rest of us quickly noticed, that these seats made it easy for everyone else in the room to watch them closely, and practically impossible for them to leave the overflowing room before the entire meeting was over. And this is because they were the furthest from the room's single door, and there were almost 24 people standing or sitting between them, and it was their only path to escape. Now, the gifts in the will were very generous, but pretty much what we had expected. Grandpa kept their house, its contents, their retirement accounts, and everything that remained after everything was satisfied. Children, grandchildren, and several local charities received nice, but not extravagant amounts of money. Several sentimental items were named and given to various friends and relatives. Grandpa was the first beneficiary listed in the will, but after him, all of the other bequests were arranged in order of increasing worth. They started with sentimental items, which had very small cash value. Then each grandchild received several thousands of dollars. Then each son, daughter, brother, sister, niece, and nephew received a little bit more. Then several local nonprofits received very nice amounts of money, and on it went. The bequests to the Big White Church, the senior pastor, and the assistant pastor were almost the last one listed in the will. They listened politely to the other people, but with steadily growing anticipation as they noticed the exponentially upward trend in Grandma's will. When Grandma's lawyer got to the Big White Church and the preacher's part of the will, he said, "This is a bit unusual, but before I announce these bequests to the Big White Church, as well as to the senior pastor and the assistant pastor, the grandmother requested that I read the following statement to everybody present." He opened a letter that was written in Grandma's own handwriting, and this is what it had to say. "For the past 10 years, not one person from Big White Church has ever called me. They've never come to visit me or sent me a note to tell me that they cared about me. Not one minister, not one deacon, not one of the church women, not even a church member who I worked with for all those years and loved dearly and thought that they were my friends. None of them showed up. I worked very hard for you when you needed me for many, many years. But when I needed you in your church, you all pretended that I didn't exist. I only got one visit when I was dying, and I invited the senior pastor to come to my house and help me plan my funeral. This was my last attempt, after many attempts, that I made over the past 10 years, just to reach out to my church and pastor, whom I still love dearly, even though they had made it clear that they did not love me. If only I could have my funeral at my church, maybe some of my church friends, whom I had not seen in a decade, would come to the service to see me one last time. And I know they love to hear the senior pastor preach, so if he preached at my funeral, maybe they would come to my funeral to hear me, even if they would not have come to see me. But the senior pastor couldn't find the time to visit me, or even call me to tell me whether or not he was willing to preach at my funeral. The senior pastor came to my house, but he didn't want to talk about my funeral. He just wanted me to remember his church in my will. That's all. Just remember his church in my will. It was then that I realized I had allowed my church to break my heart for one last time. But that was the last time, the very last time. The assistant pastor did not know it when he visited me, but Grandpa and I had already prepared my will long before his visit, which did include a double tithe. Literally 20%
50% of my entire estate for what was now my very former church, the Big White Church. This amount was going to be at a significant amount. The lawyer then named the amount, and it was an enormous amount of money. It generated muffled wows from many of her heirs, including me. The letter continues, but I got the feeling badly that we had not personally remembered such nice people as the senior pastor and the assistant pastor, so I changed my will to include them by name. While I was at it, I changed the amount of money that I left to the Big White Church to match all the love that they have shown me during the last 10 years of my life, when I was suffering and lonely, and no longer able to work my butt off for them for free, like I had done for almost half a century. The lawyer then said that is her entire written statement. Now let's get back to the bequests in the will. The assistant pastor gets 1 cent, the senior pastor gets 1 cent, and the Big White Church gets 1 cent. The senior and assistant pastor sat there looking like someone had just injected a gallon of Novocaine into their jaws. Every one of Grandma's family and friends felt an overwhelming urge to laugh out loud, but we kept quiet because we knew my grandma. We knew she wasn't finished yet. Grandma was simply setting them up for a 1-2 punch. The best was yet to come, and we didn't want to miss it. There is one last bequest, the lawyer continued, and this one goes to a charity. The lawyer named it, and for the sake of this story, I'll just call it the Black Charity. He then paused before naming the amount. Now, most of us had no idea what the Black Charity was, but by the looks on their faces, we could tell that the senior and assistant pastor knew about the Black Charity very well. Their faces displayed the same expression of shock, dread, and horror that they would have had if the lawyer had said that this money is going to the demonic baby eaters to buy extra large rotisserie barbecue grills and tons of charcoal. Every eye in the room was now fixated on the pastors. The lawyer, who happened to be my uncle, one of my grandma and grandpa's sons, let the silence continue a few more seconds. Now, if we had been able to read the pastors' minds, we would have known the history behind the looks on their faces. The Black Charity was sponsored by a large black church just a few miles from the Big White Church. They ran a free food and clothing bank, assistance programs for foster children, home delivery of pre-cooked meals for homebound seniors, legal aid, and other social services. A long time ago, the Big White Church, which was and still is 100% Caucasian, had provided a few years of financial and other support to the Black Charity. Then there was a very bitter, acrimonious breakup, allegedly because the Black Charity was practicing the social gossip, while the Big White Church was preaching the true gospel. The Big White Church even sued to try and get some of their money back, although the suit was eventually settled and very little money actually changed hands. But this being the Deep South, everyone knew the real reason why the Big White Church, or any white church, would suddenly stop supporting a black charity. And basically, it boiled down to the fact that they were racist. Grandma and Grandpa had seriously considered leaving Big White Church at that time, but they had reasoned that it was better to stay there and teach tolerance by their words and example. They knew they would never persuade everybody, but maybe they could reach some of the youth at their white church and break the generational cycle of racism. Grandma used to tell us, "My church is a mission field," and we did not learn the true depth of her statement until after she passed away. Since then, Grandma and Grandpa had secretly sent a portion of their tithe to the Black Charity every month. Most of Grandma's family, including me, didn't find out about any of this until after the meeting had ended, but the senior and assistant pastor obviously understood what Grandma, by her actions which are more powerful than words, was saying to them. If you had grown up as a white person in the Deep South as Grandma and Grandpa, as well as the senior and assistant pastor had, then you would understand. To many white Southerners, this was one of the most personally insulting things you could do to them. It simultaneously labeled them as racist and condemned their awful behavior and crushed their delusions. Having allowed time for everyone to observe the senior and assistant pastor while they thought about how their white church had treated this black charity and how they and their church had treated our grandma, the lawyer then said the amount of money that was going to this charity. And they named the exact amount of money that my grandma had named in her handwritten letter, which was the huge amount of money that would have gone to the Big White Church if she had not changed her will. My grandma was one of the sweetest, most generous, forgiving, and charming people I've ever met. She was not vindictive at all in the slightest. But honestly, everybody has their limits. Being her grandson is one of the best things that ever happened to me. Because of her, my grandfather, and other members of my family, plus my many friends, I am truly rich in all the things that really matter. Man, this story really hit some hard points. Like, first and foremost, those pastors should be ashamed of themselves, including all of the supposed friends from that church. Like, seriously, they are awful people. They're the typical person
person who doesn't practice what they preach, and they don't look after somebody who did so much for them. I mean, seriously, this grandma was very devoted to her faith. She did everything as a volunteer, she did a thankless job to try and help these awful people out, and she considered it her mission to try and help these people see the error of their ways. That is some serious dedication. If I knew exactly what this grandmother knew about these people and the way they treated that other charity, I probably would have left and been like, no, I'm not going here. But it takes some serious guts to be like, no, I'm gonna try and help them out. I'm gonna help them see what's wrong with the way they think, and I'm gonna try and lead the children away from this horrible way of thinking. Like, that's honestly such a noble thing to do, and she was probably one of the only people who actually practice her beliefs. Like, she literally drove out of her way just to cover the stupid assistant pastor, only to then have them go into her home, literally on her deathbed, and be like, remember your church, you gotta give us money at the end of the day. Well, guess what, buddy? She was already planning on doing that until you came in there and tried to do some mafia shakedown. Like, seriously, what is his problem? Who in their right mind would go into somebody's home and be like, hey, you need to pay us, remember? Yeah, sure, the funeral, you're passing away, we get it. But no, you gotta give us money. Because, you know, you gotta lay your treasures up in heaven. Like, dude, what are you talking about right now? You're insane. This is so unbelievably inappropriate, it's honestly not even funny. I can only imagine how angry the grandfather was, as well as the restraint he had towards that assistant pastor. Like, seriously, anybody who uses their religion to try and squeeze money out of your pockets or try and make you feel bad or guilt trip you into giving them money, they are an awful person. I don't care what religion you're from. It's one thing to give like a charitable donation of some kind, or even like a tithe or some kind of like donation of your own free will, but it's another thing to have some absolute jerk come in there and basically shake the money out of you. And not to mention the fact that they're only coming into her house because she's passing away and they thought there was some kind of pretty penny to get out of her. Meanwhile, she broke her back and it's been 10 years since anybody showed up. None of her friends, none of the religious leadership, literally nobody came to her aid. And that's not fair in the slightest. But the way that this grandma got back at these people was absolutely beautiful. They stuffed those stupid preachers right at the front of the row. They wanted them front and center so everybody could see their shame. And they got exactly what they deserved. Absolutely nothing. Because their demeanor is hardly that of somebody who follows their religion. They were only there to try and get money out of this woman and take advantage of her one last time, even from the grave. But honestly, in my opinion, the way she got back at these people was absolutely beautiful. She threw them right under the bus and knew exactly where to hit them the hardest. So good for her, as well as your family, for being able to find some kind of resolution for this issue. Your grandma sounded like an awesome lady, and she sounded like someone who absolutely practiced what she preached. And the fact that she was still able to get back at these people while still giving to a really good cause is honestly the best kind of karma anybody could have ever wanted. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Jerk, make sure to subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.